Jaron Jarvis Channel, Top 20 Scary Stories of the Day from Reddit nosleep. 2018-08-23. Story 1, The Rules of Lady Jade's Brothel. Congratulations on your new employment as one of Lady Jade's goddesses. You will find your employment here rewarding, and well compensated. Get ready to feeling like the goddess you are. Please be aware of the following rules for all servicing staff. 1. Condoms are 100% mandatory and required in all cases with all clients. 2. When you are hired by a client, your menu of available services will be presented to them. You are not required to perform any action you have not pre-agreed to and have added to the menu. You may add or remove any services at any time you wish. 3. Health checks every 2 weeks are mandatory. There is an on-site nurse at all times to handle any medical issues. If you ever feel unwell for any reason, please immediately contact the nurse. 4. If the nurse cannot handle what you have, she may refer you to the special nurse and contact her. Please do not be alarmed by this and do not be shocked by the special nurse's appearance or dress. She is a very uniquely skilled professional. 5. There are 5 rooms where clients are serviced. There is a 6th room besides the lobby, nurse's office, service rooms and shower room. Do not ever enter this room. Do not look into the peephole or cracks in the door. If you ever see someone entering this room, do not follow them. If you see someone leaving it, do not ask them about it or converse with them in any way, even if it's someone you have talked to in the past. 6. Alcohol or drug use during work hours is completely prohibited. 7. A shower after servicing a client is mandatory, 100% of the time. 8. The special soaps and shampoos provided in the bathroom are mandatory for all showers. Do not bring your own, and do not ever take a soap or shampoo from the bathroom with you. 9. There is an undressing room before the shower room. Before you enter you must remove all clothing or personal items and put it in one of the lockers. Absolutely no clothing can be worn into the shower room. If you do accidentally bring any clothing into the room, find one of the sealed plastic bags in the room, place any articles of clothing in it, seal it very tight, and take it to the undressing room and hit the red button. A staff member will bring you a robe and will take the bagged clothing to be burned. 10. Please do not converse in the showers at all, even if another goddess is using it at the same time who you are friendly with. And please do not ever mention anything you see in the showers once out to another goddess. If you see any odd marks on her body, mind your own business. 11. We do not have a goddess named Erica who works here. If you meet a woman claiming to be Erica, cease conversation with her, and notify security immediately. 12. If you notice a strange birthmark that resembles a skull anywhere on a client's body, terminate the session and hit the red button to notify security. You will be taken to the nurse's office, and she will immediately contact the special nurse. 13. Do not be afraid if you see someone dressed as a law enforcement officer on site. If they ask for what's available, go to the safe in the lobby and use the code 321814. Remove $500 and provide it to the law enforcement officer. 14. We have law enforcement clients. Do not be alarmed if any wish to hire you. Service them like you would any other client. 15. We are open 24 hours a day, with the exception of between the times of 3:45 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. Feel free to hang out in the lobby during those hours, and make sure any clients are aware business must terminate before that time if being hired. Please do not question anyone you see entering any rooms during this time. 16. Always count your tips and write it on a receipt after a session. If the tip equals a prime number, burn the money. We will compensate you. 17. As you learned during orientation, Lady Jade has a heart-shaped birthmark on her right breast. If she ever has a strange voice or something seems off about her, you can request to see it. Do not feel shy in doing so, Lady Jade will always comply. If the woman refuses to show her breast or doesn't have the birthmark, it's not Lady Jade. Do not obey her orders, leave immediately and notify security. And most importantly of all, make sure to enjoy yourself here at Lady Jade's. Story 2, Human Canvas, Virgin Skin. Human Canvas wanted, free tattoos. Virgin Skin preferred. DM for details. The ad popped up on my Instagram feed. In a sea of photos featuring Starbucks cups and yoga poses, the day-glow text and flashy images grabbed my attention like a bear trap. It was posted by one of my favorite artists, Bo, out of a little shop about an hour away. I'd been following him for a few years. His neo-traditional style, clean lines, and penchant for occult designs made me a rabid fan of his work. Although I'd been trying to save up enough to book an appointment with him, there was never much left at the end of my paycheck to make any real headway. That's why, when I saw the ad for free tattoos, with one of my idols, no less, I messaged him right away. Hi Bo. I'm a long-time fan of your work, and I absolutely love your style. I just saw your ad seeking a human canvas, and I'm definitely interested. If you could let me know the details, that would be great. Thank you. I spent the next hour scrolling through his feed, saving my favorite designs, already fantasizing about the feel of needles dragging ink across my skin. His reply came around 11 a.m., the ping of the notification jolting me out of a Netflix binge. Hello. Thanks for your interest. I'm looking for a tattoo model to expand my portfolio. I have a few designs I'd really like to do, so in exchange for full creative license, there would be no charge for the tattoos. Still interested? I replied back immediately, letting him know that I would happily let him tattoo whatever he wanted. After all, his work was incredible, and I knew I'd love anything he gave me. After a bit more back and forth, he confirmed that he had checked out my profile. Pleased with the fact that I had virgin skin, no existing tattoos, as well as the look he wanted to showcase his work with, we struck a deal and set a time to begin. I couldn't believe it. Out of all the potential applicants who had doubtlessly contacted him, he chose me. And he liked my look. While I'd always considered myself cute, there was nothing remarkable about me: long wavy blonde hair, blue eyes, and a petite frame. Nothing like the usual tattoo models and Instagram influencers that clogged my feed. High on the rush of being chosen, I eagerly awaited my first appointment. The following Tuesday I pulled up to the shop, barely able to contain my excitement. Bo had warned me that we would be doing a large piece, so armed with a cache of protein bars, bottled water, and bundled in my comfiest clothes, I was ready. As I pushed open the door, the sounds of Father John Misty blasting through the stereo and the smell of antiseptic greeted me. "Just a second," shouted a voice from the back room, somewhat muffled. A flock of butterflies sat in my stomach, ready to take flight at any moment. This was it. Finally. I busied myself perusing the flash on the walls, taking in the immaculately clean surroundings in the process. Everything felt right, and I knew in that moment that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Swinging the saloon-style gate open, Bo finally emerged from the back. "Hey, you must be Harlow," he said, reaching out a tattooed hand to shake mine. "I'm so excited to get started. Why don't you follow me into the back, and we'll go over everything." Dumbstruck, I meekly nodded and followed him. His Instagram profile was mostly pictures of his work, with only a sprinkling of personal photos. While I had held a vague idea of what he looked like, nothing could have prepared me for reality. He was gorgeous. Tall, lean, disheveled hair, and piercing eyes above sharp cheekbones. He had a definitive David Bowie look, and his plain white t-shirt, black jeans, and scuffed combat boots only served to highlight the intricate designs that wove around his arms, the backs of his hands, and one side of his neck. "Before we start, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. I'm so honored that you chose me," I said, breaking the silence as we entered his work area. He smiled, eyes meeting mine as he shrugged one shoulder. "When I saw your message, it just felt right. Plus, it's me who should be thanking you." He chuckled. "I've been wanting to do some of these designs for ages." He pulled a paper from a file on the desk, sliding it over to me. "This is what I was thinking we'd start with. At this size, it would fit your thigh perfectly. What do you think?" he asked, his excitement obvious. I studied the design, my breath catching in my throat. It was perfect. A beautiful woman, head turned in profile, clutching a crystal ball in her hands, her pointed nails like talons on the glass. A series of runes floated like a halo above her head, and a candle's flame cast shadows across the planes of her face. "Yes," I whispered, awestruck, unable to look away from the design. "This is exactly what I would have chosen." With that, a wide smile broke across his face. "I'm so happy you like it," he exclaimed, snatching the paper back. "I'll go print the stencil and then we're ready to start. You can hop up on the bed and get comfortable, and I'll be right back." He darted away as I arranged myself on the massage table, the paper covering it crinkling under my weight as I settled in. I had just calmed my breathing when he returned. After placing the stencil high on my right thigh and preparing his work area, he carefully tipped a small measure of dry grey pigment into an ink cup before putting on his gloves. "Ready?" he asked, the cluster of needles poised over my skin, a gleam in his eye. "Let's do it," I replied, and with that, the room was filled with the sounds of the tattoo machine. 6 hours later, my mind fuzzy and legs swollen, I stumbled out of the shop with a promise to return the following week. Time had passed both slowly and all at once, a mix of discomfort, endorphins, and the ritual of the tattoo itself. Buzz, pain, ink dip, buzz, pain, pause, wipe, repeat. Although light-headed and sore, I felt better than I could remember for a long time, the thrill of my new tattoo a heady rush. The feeling carried me through the days that followed, and they passed at record speed. I was so consumed with excitement over my next appointment, I frequently felt my focus slipping. At work, hanging out with friends, I could feel myself zoning out, nothing mattering as much as the next tattoo. I felt like I was walking through life in a trance, only half noticing the world around me. I was euphoric. I was making changes, reinventing myself physically, which would hopefully spur me into action in other areas of my life as well. However, sleep deprivation was also contributing to my new tendency to zone out. I'd always had vivid dreams, but was now plagued by nightmares as well, black smoke stinging my nose, fire licking my skin, and the sound of rending metal and screeching tires jolted me from sleep almost every night. Refusing to focus on the negative, clinging to my excitement over the new tattoos, I chalked it up to anxiety about the new direction I was taking. Change is hard, after all. Finally, I found myself back in Bo's shop. The next design, unveiled with similar excitement, was a set of alchemical symbols, illustration-style herbs and flowers, and crystals. Latin script framed the whole piece, flowing around and through the other elements like a ribbon. Placed on my upper left arm, cuffing beautifully over my shoulder cap and stopping just above my elbow, it took another grueling session to complete. Hours later, I floated out of the shop once again, buoyed by an increasing sense of contentment, growing with each new drop of ink pressed into my skin. Weeks bled into one another, my collection of tattoos growing, and my connection with Bo growing as well. During the long sessions, we discussed almost everything, able to effortlessly slip between intense conversation and comfortable silence. Outside of the tattoo studio, however, my inattention was getting worse. My performance at work was suffering, and friends had commented that I always seemed to be miles away. I attempted to make more of a conscious effort to keep my mind sharp, but it was useless. Sleeping poorly and awakening nightly drenched in sweat had left me unwilling to close my eyes at all. To distract myself, I gave myself over fully to daydreams about my visits to the shop, fantasizing about how my skin would look when the project was complete. The beautifully intricate designs and the buzz of the needle invaded my every waking moment. The ink was like a drug, and I was a junkie. These thoughts were also accompanied by daydreams of Bo. It felt as though I had known him for years, and I looked forward to our sessions together more than anything. My excitement was so complete that I would frequently find myself losing time, with no memory of what I had been doing, consumed by anticipation. Eventually, the tattoo project was almost finished. In addition to the thigh and upper arm tattoos, Bo had also etched me with many others, a serpent wound around my wrist, while 2 tarot cards adorned the tops of my feet. A moth, a skeleton key, strings of mala beads, and countless symbols now marked my body, constellations of artwork mapping my experience. I arrived at the final appointment bereft, desperate to prolong my time with Bo. Although the professional arrangement was at an end, I couldn't bear the thought of no longer seeing him. I sat in the chair, trying to collect my courage while Bo outlined the last tattoo, an extinguished match, tip blackened and bent, wisps of smoke drifting around it. My eyes cast around the shop, the space I had become so familiar with over the last months, as I struggled to find the right words to say. Should I just be bold, and ask him if he'd like to get a drink with me sometime? I wondered. He had seemed to be flirting with me at points, but it was possible I had completely misread the situation. At war with my indecision, my eyes landed on a photo attached to the top corner of the mirror above his workstation, which I had never noticed before. A blonde woman smiled in the picture, dressed in denim shorts and a tank top, knotted to expose a flat strip of her stomach. She leaned back on a motorcycle, head cocked to one side, tanned legs crossed at the ankle of her black boots. "Is that your girlfriend?" I asked Bo, nodding my head towards the photo, already heartbroken over the possibility. He paused, lifting the needle from my skin, where the tattoo was almost complete. "It was," he said, pausing to take a deep breath before continuing. "She was killed a year ago. Car accident." I was instantly appalled, having brought up what was undoubtedly a very sensitive subject. "Oh my God, Bo, I'm so sorry," I lamented, my stomach having turned to lead. He nodded, offering me a sad half-smile as he bent once more to continue the tattoo. While he worked, the strokes of the needle passing over my skin, my eyes once more rested on the photo. The more I looked, the more I began to notice the similarities. Her long wavy blonde hair, blue eyes, and petite frame. We could be sisters, I thought, taking in the details more rapidly. There, peeking out from the hem of her shorts, was a tattoo of a woman in profile, a crystal ball in her hands. On her upper arm sat the alchemy design. The snake, around her wrist. Each tattoo, a twin to the ones now marked upon my own skin. Bo noticed me stiffen, no doubt also hearing the hitch in my breath. Suddenly, his hand gripped my forearm, fingers digging painfully into the flesh just above the fresh tattoo. I was paralyzed, struck not only by the idea that Bo would do something as morbid as tattooing someone with replicas of his dead girlfriend's designs, but also by the cold hard look in his eyes. In an instant, there was no trace of the man I thought I had gotten to know. "Too bad you didn't notice sooner," he sneered, leaning closer until his nose nearly touched my own. "It's too late now." I recoiled, pressing backwards into the chair as far as I could. "Bo, what are you talking about?" "Let me go," I said, as I tried to pull my arm from his vice-like grip. He grinned, nuzzling the side of my face. "My girlfriend, Riley, died exactly 1 year ago today," he whispered, words tickling my ear. "And it's time she came back." I started thrashing then, the seriousness of the situation truly settling in. "What the fuck are you talking about?" I screamed, tears freely streaming down my face. "You're crazy. Let me go." His fist, crashing into my jaw, was his only answer. When I awoke, he was once again poised over my arm with the tattoo machine, the needles dancing across my skin. As my eyes focused and my bearings returned, he carefully tapped the dry gray pigment into the ink cup, dipping the needle in before resuming the tracery on my skin. I tried at once to move, to sit up, anything, but quickly realized my arms and legs were now secured with thick leather straps, binding me to the table. "Oh good, you're awake," he said calmly, not pulling his eyes away from his work. "It's almost time." I was about to start screaming, hoping someone would hear me, when suddenly a peaceful feeling washed over me, my previous terror forgotten. "All done," Bo said, a smile pulling up one side of his lips as he sprayed my arm, carefully wiping the fresh tattoo one final time. I looked down at the new design, admiring how the shading expertly made it appear three-dimensional. I matched his smile with one of my own. "It's perfect, baby," I crooned, voice husky as I was filled by an overwhelming love for the man in front of me. My panicked breathing ebbed as my pulse returned to normal, the earlier drama fading away completely. What had I been so worked up about? I thought, savoring the perfection of the moment. He kissed me then, sweet and slow, as he undid the straps binding me. Welcome back, Riley. Story 3, I don't know how long I've been in this fallout shelter, but things haven't gone as planned. I'm not sure how long it's been. 6 months? A year? 2? It's all blurred together. We entered the basement after my Uncle Howard heard about the attacks over the radio. There's no time to dilly, he said, lifting the metal hatch to his shelter and waving us in. We did all this prepping for a reason. So, let's get to it. That was the first day, and excitement still fluttered in our hearts. All the hard work and ridicule we put ourselves through was finally going to be put to good use, and we were ready for the task. There were 7 of us, me, my sister, Hannah, my father, Brian, my twin cousins, Alan and Richard, my aunt, Teresa, and, last but not least, my uncle, Howard. My father, sister and I moved in with them after Mom died from breast cancer 2 years ago. It was a rough transition at first. Mom was a take-no-nonsense type of woman. She was the breadwinner in the family and made enough so my father, an aspiring artist, didn't have to work. It became obvious after she passed that Dad wasn't prepared to care for us on his own, and I didn't blame him. After years of only cooking, cleaning and grocery shopping, I couldn't imagine how scared he must have been to enter the workforce again. And without our mother there to lean on, it must have felt impossible for him. So, when he suggested us moving in with his brother to ease the pain, Hannah and I more than obliged. About a week after the funeral, we went from the bustling streets of Chicago, to the serene mountains of North Carolina. As soon as we stepped out of the car onto our relative's dirt driveway, Howard began educating us on the most likely doomsday events and how we could start preparing ourselves. My father latched onto the ideas almost immediately. I like to think it was a coping mechanism, but maybe it runs in our blood. I've never really taken to the idea of prepping, but Hannah became enthralled after watching a documentary called Doomsday Pandemics. That first year with our relatives brought on a lot of experiences I'd rather not bring up. But, let's just say, I'm not the biggest fan of glorifying the apocalypse, and I've been almost shunned a couple times because of it. Teresa convinced my father that she could homeschool Hannah and I with her 2 sons. I wasn't on board, but Hannah was, and so was our father. Soon, planning became a daily thing, and then it became the only thing. Reluctantly, I eventually warmed up to it. How could I not when it was being shoved down my throat? Anyway, we collected the usual, canned foods, weapons, ammunition, hunting supplies, carpentry materials and a deluge of medical items. We jarred and preserved our own vegetables and fruits, dug out a shelter under the barn in the backyard, and fortified it with thick steel walls. Inside, there was more than enough room for our family, 3 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, 2 bathrooms, and even a small gym. Hannah gathered stacks of movies and books and I created an aquaponics grow bed for tomatoes, lettuce and spinach using an aquarium of crayfish as the nutrient suppliers. We were ready, and I would be lying if I said, at this point, I wasn't a little excited. The day inevitably came. According to Howard, the attack was biological in nature and started in New York City. He said that in a matter of 2 hours, most of the state of New York was already compromised. Whatever it was, spread through the air and would hit North Carolina in as little as a day. He didn't have to tell us twice. We freaked out and bustled to the barn, none thinking to listen to the radio and double-check the situation. The first evening is cemented into my memory. We sat in a circle on a carpet in the living room, the fluorescent ceiling lights were turned off and 3 candles flickered in bowls on the counter in the kitchen. Teresa led us in some kind of makeshift prayer and my father had his hands clasped so tightly together that his knuckles were white. Over and over, he muttered into them, "May the fires of your will cleanse those that have been too stubborn to prepare." Then Howard unsheathed the hunting knife from his belt, cut across his palm, and clenched his hand, squeezing blood into a saucer. "This is a blood oath," he began, "that we will never give in to the darkness and betray one another." After he was done, Howard passed the knife and saucer to Teresa. She copied the action and repeated the phrase, then handed them to my father. Soon, we all enacted the oath and the saucer was full. Howard picked it up, went to the kitchen and poured our collective blood into a pot of boiling broth. For dinner that night, we had soup filled with potatoes, onions, pork, and beans. None of us mentioned the special ingredient, but, I must admit, that was the best meal we've had down here, as weird as it was. After that night, things seemed hectic for a while. It was tough at first to get into a new routine, but oddly enough we all fell into our responsibilities naturally. Teresa cooked, Alan and Richard created and enforced our family's workout regimen, Howard maintained the weapons and monitored the situation above ground, my father became our preacher and art teacher, we drew or painted every evening, and Hannah and I switched between cleaning the shelter and caring for the aquaponics system. Eventually, this became normal. And day in and day out, we did the same damn thing, prepare, withstand, and hope that what we were doing would be worth it. It was hard, and when one of us finally broke, I can't say I wasn't surprised. Who knew not seeing the sun would be so tormenting? Richard was the first. We awoke to a shriek of agony one morning. According to the calendar, it was about 6 weeks after we burrowed. I remember being shaken by Hannah and my uncle drawing his knife and whispering, "Someone's gotten in. Be quiet and I'll handle this." He crept to the front of the basement where the fitness room and entrance was, a knife in one hand, and a pistol in the other. After stumbling around in the dark for about 5 minutes, Howard finally got the light on and screamed, "No. Not you." He began to sob. "Please, not you." Richard's head had been smashed to a pulp with a barbell. Bits of brain coated the bar and teeth were scattered over the floor. We entered the room to find my uncle kneeling before his son. One of the arms was still twitching. "Why?" Howard cried to ceiling, holding what was left of Richard's head in his lap and rocking back and forth. Teresa fainted at the sight, but the rest of us only stared. No one delved too deeply into Richard's death, and we decided it was a suicide, albeit a brutal one. Nevertheless, cleaning it was a job, let me tell you. I had to scrub the carpet on my hands and knees for days, and the dark stain in front of the workout bench never really came out. Luckily though, we had enough food for all the extra expended energy. None of my family were too enthralled with the idea of eating Richard when I first suggested it. But, being the prepper that he was, Howard begrudgingly agreed, saying, "We have nothing else to do with the remains." It's what Richard would have wanted. He paused, choking back tears. "Good thinking, Ethan." So, we enjoyed long pork for a while, slow roasted, in stews, and shredded in tortillas. I would be lying if I said it wasn't delicious. Dinner fueled my fortitude and we had to eat, so why waste the meat? Things got a little weird after that. Teresa stopped talking, Alan almost never slept, Howard would laugh and talk to people that weren't there, my father started wearing makeshift priest robes and constantly read from the Book of Revelation, and Hannah started cutting herself. It was a wonder to me that I was the sane one looking at circumstances realistically. Teresa was the next one to go, maybe a month later. Again, we awoke to it. But this time, there was no shriek. Hannah found the body in the bathroom. My aunt's throat was slit in a jagged cut, almost deep enough to see the neck vertebrae. Thankfully, it was done in the shower this time and there was no stain to worry about. The problem was, we had this new source of food and our cook was the one being served. So, I took over her duties. I've always enjoyed watching the Food Channel and it seemed like a natural step. Things progressively got worse though, no matter how much cheer I tried to bring or how much effort I put into presenting our meals. Alan stopped running our workouts altogether and sulked in a corner of the living room non-stop, crying about his mommy. As hard as the rest of us were working, it was unbelievably frustrating. All the spokes needed to be intact for our wheel to keep turning. So when we found him in his bed, purple-faced with a plastic grocery bag pulled over his head, I smiled, relieved. Teresa was running out and he had put himself to good use. At this point, possibly 6 months under, we were down from 7 to 4. But it didn't take long for us to dwindle to 3, and then to 2. Something about being underground seems to change people, weaken their spirits. It's the weirdest thing. Howard shot himself through the head in the armory after we finished his second son, and my father swallowed a bottle of pain pills after we were done with Howard. Hannah and I did what we could, as tough as it was. Because there were only two of us now, it was close to impossible to eat everything before it rotted. We managed though, somehow. My sister was the easiest. All I had to do was hand her a box cutter. She looked at me, understanding filling her eyes, and said in a hushed voice, "You." Then I guided her hand and she sliced her wrists. Her stew was by far the best. Now I'm alone. I've saved them all and wasted none. The key to get out is in a desk drawer in the armory. I've been debating leaving. According to the calendar, it's been a little over a year, but like I said earlier, it's all blurred together. It should be okay outside, I think. Either way, I need to find a new source of food. The preserves aren't cutting it and I'm so hungry. Hopefully someone out there is alive and reads this. Maybe we can help each other out. I'm quite the prepper. Story 4, I am an exorcist. These are my most terrifying experiences. I am an exorcist. A priest. Of sorts. I never went to formal training to become a priest, but a wonderful friend and mentor of mine, whom I will call Father James, taught me. I won't use his real name because he was very well known. He taught exorcism courses at the Vatican regularly and he became a prominent leader in the diocese where we lived. He has since passed away, and I don't want to do or say anything to taint his sterling and impressive legacy. Although I was raised as such, I'm not Catholic. I do believe in God and the devil, but not as the Catholics do. After my experience dying, a good family friend from my mother's parish told me about Father James. I sought him out and told him my story. He was certain that I had been given a special gift from heaven. Over the course of almost 3 decades, we became close friends. I guess I should tell you about when I died. When I was 15, I developed an awful infection in my leg that led to a serious fever. I don't remember the car ride, but I do remember going into the hospital and later going into a room. The person taking me back must have told me a joke because my memory is of laughing. The next thing I knew I was standing next to my gurney which was still proceeding down the hallway, but very, very slowly, so slowly you almost wouldn't know it was moving unless you focused directly at it. Even then, it was hard to tell. I instantly marveled at my astounding eyesight. I could see everyone in the hospital, as now the walls, floors, and ceilings around me were almost completely transparent. I could also see into people's bodies. I could see their organs down to a microscopic level. I watched blood pump through their veins like molasses in a blizzard. That wasn't all. If I focused intently, I could see people miles away with perfect accuracy, all frozen in time. As I looked at people, I could see their presence, their intentions I suppose, whether they were good people or bad people. It's weird to explain it, but each person was engulfed in a different glow. Most people have relatively white auras and I could tell they were good inside, but few people had very, very dark auras, which concentrated as pure, inescapable blackness inside of them. I could feel it emanating from them. The darkness cast horrific images into my mind, or filled me with terrible emotions just to be near them. It was as if they sucked their life and well-being out of people around them without anyone being aware it's happening. The other things I saw were more terrifying. I saw creatures. They varied in size, but as I glanced around I noticed they came in several varieties. There were creatures that were small with wings, or had the remnants of where wings once were, that looked somewhat like gargoyles, but they were disgusting to look at. One type of creature consisted only of a torso that floated in the air, focused on and centered above people below. Every creature that I saw was absolutely, horrifyingly, terrifyingly hideous. Just to look at them made you want to run and hide. They were preying on people by influencing their thoughts and trying to control their minds. I saw a man that was wearing what looked like a very expensive suit and tie. I was amazed at the degree of darkness that enveloped him. His aura was darker than any person I had yet seen, so much so that his eyes were pitch black to me. I saw a small demon perched on his shoulder whispering into his ear as he was in the midst of smiling and waving at someone. I heard the little devil hissing, "They can't harm me, they can't even touch me, and once they finally kill that bitch, I won't have anything to worry about." A man stood in the hallway talking on a public phone, everyone still frozen in time. A demon levitated above him, only consisting of a torso, arms and no head. He was holding two long, black ropes, one in each hand, that came out of the crown of the man's head. It reminded me of the old western stagecoaches that used reins to lead horses. Suddenly I felt a massive jolt of electricity course through me that sent pain through my whole body and made me so rigid that I couldn't move. The demons all turned and looked at me. One let loose an awful howl, a terrible, horrific sound, and pointed at me. Two demons immediately turned and started moving toward me at marvelous speed. The moment before they would have dashed into me, I awoke in a hospital bed. Several people stood over me, somewhat chaotic, fidgeting with a mask on my face and other such things. They said my heart stopped. Something due to my temperature and blood pressure, we never really got a straight answer about it anyway. After some time I recovered, but now I could sense demons around me, and it was always terrifying. I knew where they were and could discern what they were doing, either to me or to others. I could also see demons from time to time when they grew powerful enough to manifest themselves in our dimension. Although that didn't happen often, when it did, it was extremely dangerous and terribly destructive. Only these powerful demons are strong enough to possess someone. But, for a demon possessing a person, it takes tremendous endurance and power. That power, like all things, can be weakened and broken. For the most part, demons are weak. They are able to whisper in our ears and influence our minds, but there are many things that can prevent them from affecting us, or reverse the influence already established. They watch us. They know our weaknesses, they seek us out and prey upon us. Unless you give yourself over to the ocean of evil around you, odds are you will never encounter a demon. Now that we have established all that, I will tell you of my first true exorcism experience. Story 5, Mr. Smiley, your best friend. I hate clowns. Not just because they look terrifying, with their painted smiles and eyes, or because of their general over-the-top freakiness, or because of the fact that they are definitely not what you want to see when you are driving back home around midnight or any other time in general. I hate them because I don't know who is behind all that makeup or props. Trust me, the most dangerous monsters out there aren't just hiding in sewers, or dark alleys, or an otherworldly hell. Sometimes, they can be closer than you might think. Sure, some of you might dismiss the idea, but I just hope that after you hear my story, maybe you would change your mind. A long time ago, I used to love clowns. I loved their outrageous makeup. I loved their ridiculous slapstick humor. I loved them so much, I even wanted to be a clown. Ah, how innocent the first was then. It was not just me. My older brothers, being just a few years older than me, also loved clowns. And the girl who lived next door to me when I was young. And Jimmy from my old school. In fact, I was pretty sure all the young kids in my neighborhood loved clowns. Maybe it was because our neighborhood was pretty well known for having a resident clown that was very popular not just among the neighborhood kids, but the kids from the other neighborhood as well. His real name was Charlie Patterson, but his stage name was Mr. Smiley, and he was pretty ordinary for a clown. The same big nose that honked when you squeezed it, the oversized clothes and the same makeup that most clowns wore. However, what set Mr. Smiley apart from all the others was his signature symbol. After every birthday party, he would often give a smiley face sticker to the birthday kid, and wish them a very smiley day, from his best friend, or something along those lines. Needless to say, that was how he got his name. And his tagline, coincidentally, Mr. Smiley, your best friend. Soon, he became such a household name that requests for him to perform at their next birthday party were even rejected as he was busy at another party that day. A kid would even be considered lucky if their request was accepted by him. Naturally, I adored him, and my 8-year-old self just practically prayed that he could come to my next birthday party. Every single day. and when my request for Mr. Smiley to perform at my 9th birthday party was accepted by him, I could not believe it. I was so excited, I could not sleep at all. I was just counting down the days to my birthday, so I could finally see him in person. At last, on the day of my 9th birthday party, I saw Mr. Smiley for the first time in person. He arrived in his signature red and blue car, and made his grand appearance by sneaking up behind my father, carefully preparing his horn, and blowing it in my father's ear, causing him to swear very loudly. It was both scary and funny at the same time, and me, my brothers, and my friends just fell to the floor laughing our heads off. Soon afterwards, my father and the rest of the adults also laughed, and Mr. Smiley laughed hysterically at his own prank. The show had officially begun. For the next few hours, Mr. Smiley entertained all of us with his magic tricks and silly jokes. Pretty soon, it was time for him to say goodbye, and I was sad that he was leaving so soon. Cheer up, little Timmy, Mr. Smiley is sad when people aren't happy on their birthday day. You wouldn't want me to be sad, do you, little Timmy? Mr. Smiley bent down towards me and remarked, I know what will cheer you up. Mr. Smiley took something out from his pocket. I looked at it, and I cheered up almost immediately. It was the smiley face sticker. Now, little Timmy, every time you look at that sticker, you just think of the fun time you had with me today. Now, take this sticker, and smile. Mr. Smiley wants to see a smile on the birthday boy's face before he leaves. Feeling much better now, I reached out my hand to take the sticker out of his hand. I didn't get it. As soon as I reached out my hand, frenzy ensued. Loud noises suddenly filled the air, and I found myself forcibly pulled away from Mr. Smiley's outstretched hand. Mr. Smiley wasn't smiling anymore as several armed men surrounded him, ordering him to put up his hands. As I was led further and further away from the scene by my parents, I could only see his incredibly disappointed face staring straight at me. I tried to pull away, to try to smile, so that Mr. Smiley could see it. But all I could muster up was a look of confusion, as he got further and further away until he disappeared out of view. Rape. It was not until a few years later, when I was in high school, that I truly understood the meaning of that word. Then, I could finally understand what Mr. Smiley did to get himself arrested. However, back then, my 9-year-old mind couldn't understand what that man did. All I knew was that he did some very bad thing to a young girl, that his real name was not Mr. Smiley after all, and that his real face was nothing like Mr. Smiley. Throughout his entire trial, I could remember that he didn't smile, not even once. He just looked sad, disappointed. That I didn't smile. In the end, they sentenced him to a few years imprisonment. I couldn't quite remember the exact duration, but I personally didn't care about that at the time. All I could remember was his devastated face that day at my party. That was my first encounter with Mr. Smiley. But it wasn't the last. For the next few years, I went by my school life pretty quickly. High school, then university, then graduation. Pretty soon, I had secured a solid career as a psychological horror writer, and moved to a remote cabin in the Baker Forest to focus on writing without any distractions, and as my only friend, Scott, pointed out, without a girlfriend. Trust me, I couldn't care less about any girlfriend, but I just couldn't stand to be around people anymore. I couldn't forget about Mr. Smiley, and I couldn't forget how I was so close to a rapist without even knowing it. As a result, I felt that I couldn't trust anyone, and in order for me to trust someone, like Scott or my brothers, I had to know them very well before I could befriend them, in the hopes that they didn't turn out to be like him. Try as I might, I just couldn't get rid of Mr. Smiley, his smiley face stickers, or his goofy grin, which was already starting to morph into a horrifying smirk in my mind. Pretty soon, 21 years had passed since the day of that dreadful birthday party. I was now 30 years old, still holding on to my career, and Scott was finally able to persuade me to go to a blind date, which went surprisingly well. For the first time, I felt that I could finally forget about Mr. Smiley, maybe live a normal life again without any fear. That was when Mr. Smiley returned. I was joking around with my new girlfriend and walking along the woods that surrounded the cabin after our date in the nearby restaurant. When we approached the house, I noticed that there was something on the doorstep. It was a bright yellow parcel, and my name was written in black marker on the wrapping. Needless to say, the parcel looked incredibly unnatural and out of place when it rested against the dull-colored stairs of my cabin. That night, I think me and my girlfriend had a little too much to drink, because we didn't bother to question the contents of the package. I just carried the parcel into the living room, and my girlfriend fervently tore the wrapping open and opened the box, eager to find whatever was waiting for us in the box. Well, what we saw in the box instantly sobered us up. It was a large folded piece of paper with my face printed on it, and the words "Are you happy, Timmy?" written in black block letters on the paper. Needless to say, that scared the shit out of the two of us, and my girlfriend took this opportunity to say goodbye to me and leave the house, presumably because she didn't want to get involved in the sender's connection to me. As for me, I just stood there, dazed, looking at the picture. Who could have done this? Maybe it could be Scott or my brothers playing a trick on me, I thought. However, when I called them, they all denied that they sent me the parcel, and that they didn't even know that there was a parcel. Eventually, I was forced to agree with them. There just wasn't anything in it for them. I sent the parcel to the police, hoping that they could find who the sender was, and they agreed to check the parcel's details for me, and who the sender was. I was happy to hear that, as I was more than willing to forget about that parcel or that picture of me for the rest of my life. However, the parcel was not the only thing that I received over the next few days. With the help of Scott, I had managed a social media account so that I could showcase sneak peeks of my stories for people to read and review, and hopefully be convinced to buy my books. I didn't like interacting with people that way, but it did help to generate business for my novels. A few days after I had received the parcel, I went on my social media account to see the replies that people had posted regarding my latest sneak peek of my upcoming story The Utopia Experiment, and I found that someone had sent me a chat request, and was eager to chat with me online. Now, I wasn't keen on chatting with anyone, but I assumed that it would be Scott, who would often chat with me about trivial stuff that I didn't really care about every single day. Part of me was even hoping that the request could have come from some movie or TV producer who was willing to adapt my stories into films or TV shows, and I was pretty excited at that thought. The username of the person who sent the request didn't help me figure out who it was, as it was just some randomly generated username, and was not familiar to me at all. Despite all this, I was still curious to see who would chat with me, and so I started a conversation with the person. Best of Timothy Strees, hello? Who is this? Starboard 2001, it's been a long time, hasn't it, Timmy boy? Do you remember me? Best of Timothy Strees, no? I don't even know who you are. Maybe you should tell me your name first, then maybe I could remember. Starboard 2001, I'm afraid I can't tell you yet. But, I promise you, it will be a surprise. Best of Timothy Strees, if you're not willing to tell me your name, I'm ending the conversation. Starboard 2001, are you happy, Timmy my boy? I froze. I instinctively knew that this guy, whoever I was talking to, must have sent me that picture. This guy was the one that had been harassing me. Part of me thought to call the police to arrest the guy, but another part of me felt that if I played along with the guy in the conversation, I could get the harasser's name or even his motivation for sending that parcel to me, and then it would be easier to catch the guy or easier for me to understand his motivations, so that I could respond appropriately. Best of Timothy Strees, yes, of course I'm happy. I'm happier when I talk to you. Starboard 2001, are you lying? Best of Timothy Strees, of course not. Actually, I received a parcel a few days ago from some unknown guy, and I think that that someone is you. I just want to know, was it you that sent the parcel? Starboard 2001, Timmy boy, I know for a fact that you aren't happy right now. In fact, by accusing me of doing something, which I totally didn't do, you are afraid. Are you afraid of me, Timmy? Best of Timothy Strees, Maybe if I knew who you were, I wouldn't be afraid of you. Starboard 2001, fear is a bad thing, Timmy. You let it control your actions and thoughts, and you become unhappy as a result. I don't like it when people lie to me, and I'm sad when you are unhappy. So, be happy. I want to see a smile on your face. It was at this point that I had an idea who the guy was. I just sat there in my chair in a cold sweat, the memories suddenly flooding back into me. My thoughts were running wild, and I knew that he had been released from prison already, and he was going to find me. Nervously, one of my hands began typing, while my other hand grabbed my phone and opened the phone keypad. Best of Timothy Stories, are you my best friend, Starboard 2001. Starboard 2001, of course. I always have been, and always will be your best friend. Best of Timothy Stories, I know who you are. Starboard 2001, I was beginning to think that you weren't going to get it. Don't worry, Timmy boy, the cops won't find me. I will be coming to you soon, Timmy. We didn't get to say a proper goodbye that day, did we? Starboard 2001 left the session. I couldn't take it anymore. As soon as Mr. Smiley left, I called the police immediately. I told them about Charlie Patterson and how he was harassing and threatening me, and they said that they will search for him, and send an officer to my house to keep me safe if he came. The officer arrived the next day, and introduced himself as Officer Sheridan, and I accepted his offer to stay and keep me safe from any potential attack for the next few days, while the other police officers searched for Mr. Smiley. Eventually, a few days had passed since the conversation, but the officers couldn't find where Mr. Smiley was, just like he said. I had gotten to know Officer Sheridan a little better, and I found that he had a little boy named Thomas, who was kind-hearted and sweet, as he put it. I felt reassured by the officer's presence, and I felt that his interactions with me were actually helping me overcome my fear of people. However, despite my reassurance, I had a feeling that Mr. Smiley could show up at any time, and that still made me scared, not just for my life, but for Officer Sheridan's life as well. The fact that the search was going nowhere was not helping me, and I knew that when the search would ultimately end without results, Mr. Smiley would choose that moment to strike. The day before the search was called off, I was alone in my cabin. Officer Sheridan had gone out to the nearby diner to eat dinner, and I was all alone as a result. Perhaps it was because I was the most vulnerable at that point in time that I felt very scared and locked up the door to my room and the house, so that I could feel safe in the absence of the officer. After a few minutes of sitting in fear, my laptop, which was switched on at the same time, made that familiar ding noise you would hear when someone wanted to chat with you online. I looked at the username of the person who sent the request, hoping to chat with Scott or someone else who could relieve my fear. I took a look at the username, and my heart dropped. Smiley, your best friend wants to chat with you. I immediately took out my phone and called Officer Sheridan. Or rather, tried to call. He didn't pick up the phone. Fearing the worst, I called the police, and they said that they would arrive at my house as fast as they could. After I finished the call, I knew that I needed to do something. I needed to chat with Mr. Smiley. I needed to keep him busy until the police arrived. As a result, I accepted the chat request. Best of Timothy Stories, the police are coming for you. It's over. Smiley, your best friend, I thought we were friends, Timmy. I spend every day thinking of the day when I didn't get to see you smile. Best of Timothy Stories, I'm sorry, Mr. Smiley, but you're a bad guy. I cannot be your friend. Smiley, your best friend, that's all right. I know I'm a bad guy, but I can still make you smile. Best of Timothy Stories, what do you mean? Smiley, your best friend, I'm outside your house now, Timmy my boy. I stopped typing, paralyzed with fear. I could hear a familiar laughing outside the house. The same laughing that followed a prank. But this time, the laughing wasn't funny. It was the laughter of insanity, the laughter of a madman. I nervously got up from my chair, and parted the curtains. There, standing below my window on the grass, was Mr. Smiley. He was smiling and waving, a phone in his left hand, and he was wearing his usual red and blue clown makeup, but under the glow of my bedroom's light, it distorted his smile and makeup, causing him to look less like a clown, and more like a monster. "Come on, Timmy my boy, open the door. I can perform my last trick for you, and I can give you a sticker when I'm finished." "You didn't get a sticker that time, did you, Timmy?" Mr. Smiley shrieked. I knew what trick Mr. Smiley was referring to as soon as I took a look at what he was holding in his right hand. It was an axe. "Come on, Timmy. Open the door, and I can show you the trick." I must say, that officer loved my trick so much, he was on the floor. That's how good it is. "So, come open the door." I refused to move. My eyes scanned the room for anything sturdy I could wield. Mr. Smiley had started to move towards the back door, and now he was using his axe to smash the door open. "If you won't smile for Mr. Smiley, Mr. Smiley will make you smile. Forever." My eyes fixed onto the bat that I had used for baseball tryouts in university. I moved towards it and picked it up with my trembling hands. With a sickening crash, the back door broke open, and I could hear Mr. Smiley run to the stairs, screaming and laughing. One part of me was pleading for me to escape through the bedroom window, but another part of me felt a strange burning anger towards Mr. Smiley. He had killed an innocent officer. He was planning to kill me next. I needed to stop him once and for all. Mr. Smiley was outside my bedroom door now, and he began to smash the door with his axe, as wood splinters came flying out of the points of impact. I had decided on what I needed to do next. I waited for Mr. Smiley to enter. With another sickening crash, the bedroom door flew open, and standing at the entrance was Mr. Smiley. His smile was contorted, his eyes looked wild, and he was staring at me with excitement. In his hand was the axe, which I could clearly see was caked with blood now. Mr. Smiley let out a piercing, inhuman scream, raised his axe, and began to run towards me. I hit him before he hit me. Mr. Smiley staggered, blood pouring from his head. He tried to run towards me again, and I hit him again. He staggered again, the axe dropping out of his hand, and he collapsed on the bedroom floor, blood pouring out of his mouth. I did it. I stopped him. As I stared at the dying Mr. Smiley, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I no longer had to fear him anymore. As those thoughts ran through my mind, I found myself unconsciously smiling. It was then that I heard Mr. Smiley's last words. As I dropped the blood-soaked bat, still smiling, and as the sounds of police sirens filled the air, I heard him say, in a raspy, weak voice, "Finally made you smile." That was my final encounter with Mr. Smiley. The blows on his head were fatal, and he died shortly after he was moved to the hospital. As for me, since I did attack him out of self-defense, I wasn't charged. But despite this, I still voluntarily went for therapy sessions to cope with the emotional and mental impact I had received when I killed Mr. Smiley. I didn't mind the sessions. I didn't need them. For the first time in 21 years, I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't need to be scared of people. I had faced my fear, and I had defeated it. I was finally free. Before I end my story, I want to share with you guys about something that happened this afternoon. I had just been discharged from the hospital, and was heading home to the cabin after being away from it for a while. Ever since the attack, I have since asked my brothers to help repair the damage done to the cabin, including replacing the doors that were destroyed. As I was walking towards the door, my eye caught a glimpse of a yellow thing in the mailbox. I took it out, and I saw that it was a yellow envelope, with my name written on it in large black block letters. I knew who it was from almost immediately. I opened the envelope, and as soon as I saw what was in the envelope, I began to chuckle. It was a smiley face sticker. Story 6, I'm in love with a fairy tale. Some years ago there was a pretty popular song titled Fairy Tale, and every time I happened to listen to it, I was surprised at how much I could relate to it. The lyrics said something along the lines of, "I'm in love with a fairy tale even though it hurts." I realized then that I was living in such a fairy tale. I've led a life like a princess for as long as I can remember. I have my castle, my prince, my guards. My castle is huge with a nearly not countable number of rooms, wide and majestic, featuring everything a girl like me would ever ask for. I get new dresses all the time, all the food that I want. I can freely pursue my various hobbies from painting over singing to playing chess. When I get bored, my prince never fails to entertain me somehow. He thinks of creative new games to pass the time, or brings me gifts, or just plays with me. He taught me how to dance and how to sing, and tells me how pretty I am and how much he loves me every day. Sometimes I don't see him all day long, but when the sun sets and darkness slowly crawls into my castle, he is sure to visit. He teaches me what a queen needs to know, and he won't leave until the next morning. I am usually pretty exhausted the following days, but I always knew that I still had a lot to learn. It was much later, when he brought me a TV, that I realized that my life was different than that of most other girls my age. When I compared mine with those of the girls in movies, I realized that most of them didn't live in a castle like mine. I wondered how their princes could be as careless as to let them go out on their own almost every day, and soon I began to wonder why I wasn't allowed to leave my castle. That's when I started to question my life, or rather the illusion I lived in. That's when I realized that my castle was cold and lonely, that it had no windows and only closed doors, that my guards were huge dogs, starved for days so that they always glanced at me with hungry eyes while snarling with threatening growls coming from their skinny bodies, and that my prince punished me for every game I lost physically or verbally, that his gifts were nothing more than new tools to torture me, that his games were pleasure only for him. As the illusion of my royal life slowly collapsed, I became aware of his bloodshot eyes, their gaze stuck to my naked body, as his rough hands held onto my arms firmly while he danced his awful dance as long as he wanted to, no matter how loud I sang, no matter how hard I cried. When I finally, after all these years, dared to look into his face, the dirty grin on his even dirtier skin told me what I should have known from the beginning, that he wasn't the prince in my fairy tales. He was the monster. The monster that held me hostage in the isolated castle in the woods. I have not shown him that, I know. He thinks I still live in his fantasy world. But I am awakened from my 100-year slumber, and after anxiously counting the days alone in my secluded tower, I came to the conclusion that it is no use waiting for a prince to save me. I have been fooled by a charlatan once who claimed to be my prince, my savior, but in the end was nothing but the dragon that locked me in this prison I call home. Do fairy tales, I wonder, always have to end with the heroic prince rescuing the poor princess? Maybe, it then comes to my mind, it is time the princess stops waiting and tries to fight the beast on her own. Maybe it is time for her to use all the weapons she has secretly been storing over the years and show the false prince what she is capable of. I hear the dogs barking, the door opening, his heavy footsteps coming closer. Today is the day. I don't know if I will be successful and what will happen to me if I am not, but I have waited long enough for a miracle that won't happen. Wish me luck. Story 7, so I wake up to every ex I've had. I haven't been sleeping well lately. I don't think I've ever slept well, come to think of it. It probably has everything to do with all the writing I'm not doing, or maybe the fact that I'm so afraid of my nightmares that I have to wait until I can barely keep my eyes open so that my sleep is so deep that I can't remember dreaming. I've been shortening my lifespan with this ritual since I can remember. I'm 33, and my dad passed away 2 years ago. Went through a hurricane last year. It's been rough. Let's add on top of that the place I was staying in, during a sublease, I had been paying rent and, surprise, none of it was going to the bank. Between fighting crippling depression, writer's anxiety, trying to get a graphic novel off the ground, I fuck around and decide to take some sleep aids. Not abusively, just the prescribed amount, and I'm thinking I'd be off to a dark, dreamless fuck. Wake up Trez, I know that voice. Wake up damn it, we need to talk. All of us. I have to pull the crust from my eyes, like some booger cocoon, and to my panic I see every girl I've ever dated surrounding my bed. I'm not okay. I move to get up, and before my foot can touch the ground I see them start to shake violently. Not convulse, they vibrate, fast, back and forth in a way that makes them hard to discern. I pull my foot in the bed, they come back into focus. I'm confused. So, while you were asleep, we were talking. My first ex says, Some girl that I can hardly remember from junior high school. I can recognize her clothing, but her face's eyes, and a mouth. I can't make out anything else, as if my memory has perfectly blurred her existence and she is, in turn, annoyed at her lack of clarity. We just thought you should choose between us, my second ex adds, holding a small paper bag with breakfast in it. I'm pretty sure it's breakfast, because it's one of the only things I could remember about her. She brought me breakfast every day at school and it was literally the one thing I couldn't eat. Thoughtful. Why do I have to choose between you? We aren't even together anymore? I said, pulling my covers to my cheek, knowing this dream was not one I could fly out of like usual. You will choose one of us, and the rest of us will try to kill you. My third ex spoke, ironic now that they took turns from oldest to recent. Wait. You want to kill me? I said, backing up into the wall behind me, clutching my pillow hard. Well, not just you. You and whoever you choose. Your mind has been wandering and we have all decided it's just better if you died. You'd have a fighting chance, but you'll probably lose, my fourth ex. I could still hear the judgment in her voice. Unlike my third ex who I'd only left because I was moving again, this one was the daughter of a preacher, rife with judgment. Which is weird because I was also the son of a preacher, so at least irony isn't lost in this sick hellscape. The bed jumped from underneath me, and I noticed disembodied voices, hands and legs climbing up the sides. Oh, those would be all the women you fucked and never took seriously, my fifth ex, my first long-term relationship, my first real love, the person I thought I'd live and die for, sat directly at the base of my bed, eyes missing from their sockets, fingernails like razors resting in judgment on her biceps with her arms crossed. I'd only recently seen what she was up to, so I was confused at her presence, or her visage. I don't need any finger pointing from you, number 5. I don't recall why. I couldn't breathe. I felt a sharp pain in the center of my back. My heart raced with stinging electricity, and darkness started to creep around my eyes. Was I having a heart attack? The arch of my feet tickled and itched, and right when I went to scratch it, I was back to normal. Okay, so many. Why are there so many women under your bed, Therese? What did you do? Are you a monster? Ex number 6, only my second serious relationship, the crux of my persona, the defining path of my current life. Her hair covers her face, marks on her body from some ritual I was not privy to, and I notice skin flaking from her shoulders. I shouldn't have cared for her tone, but I felt myself sink back some. Guilt. Before I could reply, I felt my hair stand on end. Two of the hands from underneath the bed grabbed my arms, slinging me down to the comforter, and I would have bet anything they were trying to rip me apart. Doesn't feel good to be used and thrown away, whether you meant to or not. Pathetic? I couldn't see her, but I could hear the smile in her voice. Cynical, yet understanding, with a touch of crass. I'd have let out a laugh, or a greeting if I didn't think my skin was going to come apart between my chest from all the pulling. 4 more hands come crawling up my body, and from the sharpness of the nails I knew another ghost of fuck this past was looming. And I knew which. I shouldn't even be here, I was perfect for you. You're a fucking idiot for letting me go, the demon speaks. She is certainly not a demon, but number 8 had a voice that pulled the warmth out of the room. If there was ever a time I'd write a thank you letter to a condom company. Yeah, why did you let her go? She was everything you told me your parents wanted. I don't get it, number 5 said, making the other girls turn to her. Apparently, she spoke out of turn, and I was not surprised. Not really a rule follower, causing the room to shrink. I think it had something to do with her need to cause me grief. A baby is not something you lord over someone, born or not. I don't care how good the grip. I thought I felt my legs snap. Something is certainly burrowing into my shoulder blades. The sexed pillow are getting restless. Was it worth it? You're going to die here. This isn't a dream. Can't you feel it? My number 6 lays her head on my stomach and it's like knives are shredding my skin, opening me up, but I'm not bleeding. I'm angry I'm not strong enough to break free, that my mind won't let me slip into some freaky sex stream. Just ex-purgatory. I can barely breathe, and it's in that moment I realize I was told what to do already. I just couldn't make a sound loud enough over my groans. The anxiety burns up to my temple, and a high-pitched ringing drowns out the slowing of my heartbeat. This dream is killing me, and I have to end it soon, or else this could actually be my hell. Waking up to my failed love lives for eternity, incapable of making things. That's it. I'm not sorry. Blink. I'm in the bed, sitting up while all of them stare bewildered, frozen in some wild-eyed fright. I gathered myself for a second before speaking, wrapping the covers around my chest as if it would actually help. I could sit here and apologize for every time I'd ever hurt each of you, and I'm pretty sure I'd be here for years, but we aren't together anymore, and your lives are better without me. You're on your way to meet someone who won't haunt you, that will give you the support you need, the lifestyle you crave. They'll worship the ground you walk on. You deserve that blue early morning sunrise, cradled in bed, while they whisper all the things they want for you in your ear like a prayer between you and God. Because I'm gone, you're going to find that love, so while I may not have ever wanted to hurt you, I know you'll be better off without me. That's the man we always wanted, they said in unison. Who do you choose? None of you, I exhaled, seeing them near me. My body twisted in unusual ways. My screams come out like white noise. Blood seeps from every opening. I was surely being killed, and then I'm awake. My chest hurts. I throw the pills away. I'm okay. Part of me felt dirty, like I had to wash off the guilt of thinking about people I swore I was over. Stumbling out of bed, half asleep, I pulled back the shower curtain and felt an ache in my stomach. Lifting up my shirt, I stopped to stare, lazily at first, then in a growing panic. Long, narrow scratches, right where they tore me apart. I looked in the mirror. A bruise on my neck, where it had been snapped. I jump in the shower to wash it off, and I let out a hard groan when I notice skin missing from the lower center of my back, the water pushing blood down the drain. Easily explainable. Bed bugs or something. I scratch a lot in my sleep, no big deal. Those sleeping pills gave me a bad reaction and I bruised my neck tossing and turning. Then my phone rings. No number, but the caller ID says, all of US. I'm not okay. Story 8, Bizarre Encounters on a Tour in North Korea. This wasn't a typical vacation. Normally, I would have just gone to Hawaii or Japan. Or somewhere else. But I suppose I was feeling adventurous at the time. What a mistake. Now, I never ran into trouble with the government. That wasn't what made this trip horrific. I just stayed within the boundaries outlined by our tour guide, and there were no problems in that regard. Although, maybe I would have preferred the alternative. I went with two of my friends, and first few days of the trip essentially consisted of us marveling at how surreal this whole situation felt. The tour's obviously propaganda. The sights, shows, food, we all knew that it was meticulously planned. Not like it really bothered us. We weren't there to start some kind of revolution. And we never felt explicitly unsafe. That was until the third day of the trip. We were in a theater, watching a performance. It was kids, singing and playing instruments. And it was boring as hell. I was about to doze off before my buddy Jeff nudged me back into reality. I groggily stared at him, before asking what he wanted. I was expecting him to warn me about falling asleep during the performance, but his actual words caught me off guard. Over there. He told me. What the hell? My eyes tracked to where his finger was pointing. It took me a second to realize what he was referring to. But when I did, I nearly jumped. There was a person up a couple rows from us. A person with their head completely down in their lap, almost as if they were sleeping. But they were too still. As in their shoulders were not moving at all. And that was another thing. Their shoulders. I've never shoulders that wide before. It was borderline inhuman. I looked at the people sitting beside this oddity, but none of them seemed to notice. Well, upon further inspection, it looked more like they were trying not to notice. Every few moments or so, they'd turn their heads, and I could see a demeanor of tension on their faces. The show went on for about 5 more minutes before a man in a suit abruptly ran onto the stage and signaled for the children to stop. Everybody was ordered to leave soon after. As I was heading out the door with my tour group, I looked back, only to see that the person with their head down still hadn't moved an inch. Everybody else was leaving. I contemplated asking our tour guide about this, but decided against it. I'm not even sure how many people out of our group noticed it. Surely, it was more than just Jeff and I, but I suppose that they didn't really want to think about it. Safe to say, this kinda put a pit in my stomach. Fast forward to that night at around 9 p.m., and Jeff and I are in our hotel room. There wasn't a whole lot to do. The local television was rather dull, and we were too paranoid to make an attempt to access the internet. We were free to roam around parts of the hotel, so that's what we decided to do. We met up with our other friend Jin, a Korean Canadian, and began wandering around the place. Leading up until midnight, it was mostly uneventful. We swam in the pool, ate some late dinner, and watched a movie on my laptop in our room. Well, it wasn't completely uneventful. This next incident was why I even included this part in the story. While roaming the hallways on one of the upper floors, we found an obscure door number. This is how it went: 715, 716, 717, 71X. At first, we assumed that this was just some kind of error. This assumption was admittedly somewhat of a stretch. I mean, how do you confuse the number 8 with the letter X? We stood out there for about 5 minutes, discussing to ourselves what this was supposed to mean. That was until I felt something tapping my shoe. There was a finger poking out from underneath the door. It was long and pale, too much so for my rational brain to comprehend. Needless to say, we immediately went back to our rooms. Now, it's not like there wasn't a cogent explanation for this. Some person was pissed off that 3 assholes were standing outside their door at midnight, so they devised a way to make us leave. A really tall and pale person. In any case, this wasn't some kind of breaking point for us. Weird shit has been happening, but hey, we only had a couple days left in the tour. However, what happened later that night nearly got us there. At around 2 a.m., I felt Jeff tapping me on the shoulder. "Dude. Fucking hell," was all that he said. He gestured me towards the window and I followed. At first glance, it appeared to be some kind of military personnel marching by himself in the field in front of our hotel. I suppose it was funny for the first few moments. And then you really start thinking about it. Why was this happening? I wasn't sure how long this was going on for, but there was no way that this would have been acceptable behavior under North Korean standards. Even if the guy was a bit gone in the head, I felt like somebody would have stopped it by now. This went on for about 10 more minutes, before a vehicle finally pulled up near him. 2 soldiers got out and started walking towards Rouge Marcher. They stopped within about 3 feet of him and appeared to exchange a few words. And a few moments later, they took off running. They were out of there as abruptly as they came. At this point, all bets were out the window. Something was going on here. Something that we didn't quite understand. We continued watching for some duration of time afterwards. It was only when the man stopped in his tracks and turned his head towards us where we looked away. We closed the blinds, made sure the doors were locked and tried to fall asleep. Tried. There was no chance of that happening. The next morning was a bit of a blur. We heard a knock at our door at around 7 a.m. Tired as hell, I got up and looked through the peephole. It was our tour guide. And he looked confused. "What's going on?" I asked him. "I don't know." He told me. "But we're switching hotel rooms." Don't ask me why, I don't know. I refused to believe the connection between what we saw last night and what just happened there. But deep down, I knew that they had to be related. This suspicion was only bolstered when I saw multiple ambulances parked at the side. They sure weren't there last night. We got onto the bus and started heading towards the new place. Jeff and Jin managed to fall asleep, but I simply couldn't. At some point, I started up a conversation with the Swedish guy, Henrik, sitting next to me. I've spoken to him a bit beforehand. Apparently, he was somewhat of a veteran in NK. This was his 5th trip. He was actually hoping to put together a documentary some point down the line. Pretty cheery guy, usually. But not that day. Like me, he had bags under his eyes and his expression held what I can only describe as explicit confusion. "Did you see it last night?" he asked me. It was pretty obvious what he was referring to. So I nodded. "Yeah. Weird as shit." He dug around in his bag and pulled out his video camera. "Bet you didn't see it up close." He was right. The guy was relatively far away, so I couldn't make out any intricate details. But did I even want to know? Henrik pulled up the video that he'd taken last night and I began watching. It started out blurry, but soon focused on the same thing that I'd seen last night. The marching man. But Henrik kept zooming in. And zooming in. Eventually, we were close enough to the point where we could see the face. At that moment, I just wanted to run back home. It couldn't have been a mask. It looked too real. The triangular mouth lined with razor teeth and the singular, beady eye that seemed to be pulsating with every movement. What the fuck is this? The video ended right there. Couldn't blame him for not wanting to film more. He shoved the camera back into his bag and sighed. 4 times I've been here, and haven't seen shit. Why now? The rest of the trip was tense. I don't know if it was just me, but I could have sworn that there were people staring at us from outside every few minutes. Actually no. It wasn't just me. There were people standing perfectly still in the most obscure places, simply staring at our fucking buzz. I counted about 14 in total. When we got to the new hotel, I ran up to my room and stayed there. Thankfully, it was a 3-person accommodation, so Jin and Jeff were both with me. Jeff and I refused to go any more ventures outside the hotel. We simply sat there and waited for this trip to end. But Jin never saw what we did. He was still spooked from that finger incident earlier, of course. But he still decided to go out. The 2 of us watched about 6 movies that day. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became evening. The only time we really left the room was for dinner. When we walked into the dining area, we noticed that about a quarter of the group, including Jin, still weren't back yet. We were told that they'd gone to see some sporting arena or something. During our meal, I overheard a rather peculiar conversation between 2 men with American accents. They were talking about strange things. Things that seemed pertinent to what we'd been seeing. I overheard words like anomaly and dimensional and gateway. The word ocean also seemed to pop up a lot. The 2 were friendly enough, and welcomed me into the discussion. I waited for them to tell me their own stories about what they'd seen here. But apparently they hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. "Oh no, nothing's happened to us," one of them said. "We came here hoping that it would, though." Apparently, their own trip to North Korea was sparked by a thread that they'd come across on a website that discussed paranormal occurrences and where people could find them. They didn't delve into too many specifics about it, though. Just that the site wasn't really accessible to the public. That it contained information that could be deemed sensitive by some governments around the world. You all know what that means. I won't elaborate further on that. Anyhow, there was some kind of leaked document circulating that site regarding anomalous occurrences that were supposed to take place during one specific week in North Korea. As it turns out, that was the week that we decided to go. Now, most of the document was actually unreadable, so they could only glean a few key details. The date of the week, obviously, but also entities that were referred to as abstract beings and something about the Yellow Sea connected to the Pacific. However, what was really going on remained unknown. All that the Americans knew was that there was a good chance of seeing some freaky shit if they came. Fortunately for them, that hadn't come to fruition yet. I ended up telling them about what I saw, and this seemed to get them rather excited. Crazy-ass Americans. It was later that night where shit hit the fan. It was around 7 p.m., and Jin still wasn't back. This was getting a bit too late. However, somebody knocked on our door about 15 minutes later. Well, he's back, is what I was thinking to myself. But before I could get up, Jeff stopped me. His face was dead serious. Jin has a key. Why would he knock? I froze, lingering on those words. Even if he'd lost his key, he would have tried calling out for us to open up. Slowly, I got up and made my way towards the peephole. I looked through, but was met darkness. Somebody or something was blocking our view. It wasn't soon after when I felt something touching my toe. In the back of my head, I already knew what it was. I just didn't want to look down. But I had to. It was the fucking finger. I scrambled backwards, watching the appendage retract as I did. I went to the phone and called the number they gave us for emergencies. I told the man over the line that somebody was trying to get into our room, and they assured us that they'd be sending somebody up there. We waited in agonizing silence for what felt like an hour. Eventually, we could hear multiple pairs of heavy footsteps coming down the hall, towards our room. But here's the problem. We also heard them coming to an abrupt halt as they got closer. Interlocking voices shouted in Korean before fading away. Back down the hall. These guys were running away. What the fuck was out there? At about 10 p.m., it sounded like reinforcements came. There was a small battalion out there. A lot of harsh, but frightened sounding yelling ensued before whatever entity was out there spoke up himself. A subterranean, guttural amalgamation of demonic-sounding tones started echoing throughout the entire place. The most bizarre thing was that no gunshots were ever fired. I mean, you'd think that they'd shoot at the fucking thing, right? A tense struggle elapses right outside our door for the next few hours. It finally ends with a clusterfuck of shouting and banging on the floors and walls. It was at midnight when a voice called out to us, saying that they were coming in. We braced ourselves for the worst, but when the door finally opened, it was just two tall men in suits that greeted us. One white, one Asian. We assumed the Asian to be Korean, but his English was tinged with a noticeable Chinese accent. The other man had a Russian one. They apologized for what we'd experienced and said that a bus was waiting outside to take us to the airport. In addition to that, we were to be refunded for our entire trip. Nothing that they told me could have made me gladder. I didn't even bother asking any questions. I mean, there was no chance in hell they were going to get answered, so fuck it. We were getting out of here. I'd nearly forgotten about Jin when we finally boarded the vehicle. He was sitting at the back. And he looked like hell. "Where have you been, man?" Jeff asked him. Jin simply shook his head. "I don't think I fucking know," was his only response. It was hard getting words out of him afterwards. When we finally left, I noticed that there were 2 empty seats on the bus. I scanned everybody, and it became obvious to me who was missing. The paranormal-seeking Americans from earlier. I tried not to think about it for the rest of the ride. I tried not to think about it while we boarded the flight. I tried not to think about anything. I just sat back and prayed we'd get to Beijing soon for the connecting flight home. Spoiler alert. We did. We stayed here for 2 days. And I'm in the airport now, about to board my flight. The bustling metropolitan nightlife of this city was absolutely a welcome change compared to the dark, spine-chillingly empty streets of North Korea. I can't tell you what happened. In all honesty, I'll probably never find out. I'm going to upload this soon. Fine, now I'll sign off. This guy next to me won't stop staring at my screen and it's getting annoying. Story 9, Knock Knock. There was a knock at the door. I got up from my desk to answer it. I was thinking it was one of my friends, coming over to hang out, or some solicitor, trying to get me to subscribe to some sort of bullshit service. But it was 10 o'clock at night. Regardless of how weird I thought it was, maybe someone just ended up getting lost, and they needed directions? I opened the door, and immediately saw that no one was out there. I looked around for a good minute, but no one came. Naturally, I closed the door, and went back to my desk. I was working on a new idea for a story, and was just brainstorming whatever came to my mind. I hadn't really started much. I was barely a paragraph into the story, or idea, when I was so rudely interrupted. However, when I sat back down at my desk, to continue writing, I noticed a new tab was opened in my Google Docs. When I clicked on it, the page was completely blank, except for two words knock knock. There was 2 quick knocks at my door. I closed out of the document, and went back to the door. I swung it open and yet again, no one was there. Not a soul to be seen, or found. I closed the door yet again, and made my way back to my desk. Knowing my luck it was just a bunch of delinquent teens making a ruckus. But my mind went back to the document earlier. I reopened the tab, and went to my drive, looking for the classic untitled document in my folder, but it was nowhere to be found. I checked my recycle bin, nothing. Just like that, poof. I went back to my previous tab, where I was working on the outline of the idea I had for a story, only to find it completely blank, except for 2 words. Knock. Knock. There was a heavy knock, and a long pause, followed by another heavy knock. I yet again went to my door, hoping someone was there, but yet again, no one was there. And when I went back to my document it changed yet again. The knock was still there, but below it on another line was another knock. And the line below written in the same way. It continued on, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines. Like it had a rhythm. There was 2 knocks at my door. One louder, the other quieter. Silence. Knock, knock. Silence. Knock, knock. Silence. Knock, knock. It beats like a rhythm, synonyms with the pounding in my chest. I yet again walked to the door, this time with my knife. The door swung open, and the knocking subsided, and I was alone in silence, yet again. I rushed back to my desk, knife still in hand, desperate for answers. The only thing I saw was the blank document in front of me, except for 2 words. Knock knock. The door knocked again, and stopped. I didn't move. Knock knock. I didn't move. Knock. Knock. What normally sounded like it was coming from outside the house, was now coming from inside the house. I still remained still, knife in hand. Knock knock. Closer the knocking got. Knock, knock. Silence. Knock, knock. Silence. Knock, knock. The knocking continued to get closer, this time, as if it were in my hallway, creeping forward, and pulsing with my heartbeat. It got closer and closer, leering its way down the hall, in that ever-prevalent beating knock. Knock. Then the knocking began on the wall, stretching closer and closer to my desk. Knock. Knock. Getting louder and louder, closer and closer. My head snapped from my desk right as the knocking reached the corner of the hallway, and where my desk was. I waited. Nothing. Knock. Knock. The knocking came from my desk. Gulping, I looked back at my desk, knife in hand. Nothing, and the document was blank again, except for 2 words. Behind you. In a sudden movement, dark elongated hands reached into my peripherals, and wrapped around my mouth, jerking me into darkness. I woke up at my desk, a document open on my computer. I had only written 2 words on the docket. Knock knock. And there was a knock at my door. Story 10, Room of Terror. A few months ago I lived in a small duplex in the suburbs of New York City while I worked a freelance job. I was only there for a few months, and the rent was a no-lease month-to-month kind of deal. The rent was cheap, and the people in the building next to me said nobody stays in that building for very long. The place was kind of a shithole, so I figured it was just a temporary place for people. A few days after I moved in, I was getting ready for work, and just as I was leaving I found a series of photos under my door. They were of me, inside an apartment that looked just like mine. I was tied to a chair, naked, being tortured. There was no doubt the photos were me. I have a lot of tattoos, including plenty under my clothes, and they were all in the photos. I freaked out and I called the police. I was convinced somebody photoshopped the images. I was completely stumped. The strangest part was it looked just like my apartment, but backwards. After hours of thinking, I was convinced it must have been the person who lived across the hall from me in the other room. I asked the police to talk to them, but when they knocked on the door nobody answered. I took the photos to a developing center and they said the photos must have been developed in a private studio, and they were authentic. They couldn't find any signs of Photoshop. But I knew it was that person who did it. How did they get my photo? Who lived there? Why were they doing this? Over the next couple days, I would wake up, naked, my clothes nowhere to be found, and in an excruciating amount of pain. So one night, I set up a camera to record myself as I slept. I woke up once again, naked, in pain, and my camera had died shortly after I started recording. I tried again the next night, with a freshly charged battery. But when I woke up, once again the battery had died shortly after I fell asleep. The next day was a Friday, so I drank a few 5-hour energies and planned to stay up all night. I remember being up from dusk to dawn, but in a sudden moment out of absolute exhaustion, I fell asleep. I woke up only an hour later, naked again, and more photos under my door. I called the police and this time they thought I was faking it. I didn't know what to do. I finally had enough and called the landlord, asking about the person living across the hall. She claimed that nobody lived in the apartment. So I armed myself with pepper spray, broke the handle off with a hammer, and opened the door. It looked like nobody had been there in ages. But as I explored the apartment, I opened the bedroom door, I saw a chair with straps, bolted to the floor, next to a pile of my clothes. I called 911 and waited outside the building. When the cops arrived, I brought them in the apartment, but the chair was gone. I moved out that day. Story 11, time stopped, but not for us. I swear, time stopped, but not for us. 3 of us were on that couch when it first happened, but Jessie was coming from the kitchen. She and Mark were having Vicky and me over for a few beers, a double date night watching The Shining, and Jack Torrance was tearing apart the door with his axe. He poked his head through, and just when he was about to say "Here's Johnny," the TV froze. His rabid smile stuck on the screen. We waited, then I tried to change the channel, but still his face remained, seemingly staring at us. I tried to turn off the DVD player. Nothing. What the fuck? Vicky blurted. That was the best part. My thoughts exactly, I said. Maybe it just needs to turn off or something. Mark got up and moved toward the TV, good idea, Kyle, and unplugged it. But still, Jack Torrance stared. Okay, that's weird, I said. Hey, Jessie. Does this ever? But Jessie was frozen, mid-stride, her face flat, expressionless. Mark ran to her. Jessie. Jess. What's wrong? Still she was frozen, a can of beer tight in her hand. Vicky pointed out the window and yelped. The cars, the people. They're not moving. The street was dark but the headlights of a dozen cars were still. Then suddenly, everything shifted. Jessie dropped her beer, but she remained frozen. Come on, Jess. What's wrong? Mark asked, but quieted. Jessie's eyes were wide and huge and her mouth was open and her throat ready to scream. Jessie, Vicky cried, what's the matter? Everything remained, she screamed, she screamed, she screamed the same scream over and over like a skipping record. Jack Torrance likewise skipped, here's, and he stopped. Vicky cried and Mark hugged Jessie's stiff body, her arms up, bracing for something. He muttered, don't worry, Jess. I'm not leaving. Jessie's head jerked to us, back and forth, as she screamed help. 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 And Jack Torrance said, John, 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 and a thick black smoke jutted up before her, spindly silver spines shot out like claws from within it and wrapped around her and pulled itself tight to her. The thing covered her whole body until she was pitch black. She repeatedly screamed run. Run, run. But it was muffled and weak and Jack said, NY, NY, NY. Then it was gone and Jessie was mid-stride before us, again, expressionless. Mark said, what the fuck is? The TV blared, here's Johnny. And Jessie screamed, help. Run. And she was enveloped by black and disappeared. I did not know what to do. I kept staring at the spot behind the couch and by the kitchen where Jessie had but no longer stood. A scream came from behind me and I spun around. Mrs. Torrance, from the television set, sliced her husband's hand and he likewise screamed. Vicky threw her blanket over her head. Ew, ew, I hate blood. Kyle, babe, tell me when it's over. I looked around the room. Vicky's hands were obviously over her eyes beneath the blanket on the couch. Mark had his arm around the headrest of the couch where Jesse had cuddled with him. Lights flashed from outside. I listened. Car horns, the whooshing of cars and squeaking of their brakes. I looked out the window. Traffic, people walking, a man hailed a taxi. Was I going insane? So, no one wants a beer, I take it? Jessie said as she walked into the room and plopped next to Mark. Jessie, I gasped, are you all right? Yeah, of course, she popped the can. It's only my third beer, Kyle. Besides, I'm not the one who's driving, idiot. Didn't you guys see that everything just, SHH? Jessie said, pulling over a blanket, this is the part where Mr. Halloran comes. I need a beer. I just asked. I changed my mind, I said, opening the fridge and a can of Miller Lite. Maddening, crazy, she was there, frozen, then that thing came, and what happened? She was gone. I thought I was going crazy. I gulped the entire beer and cracked another. What was that thing? I thought. Black, pure black. With those claws or legs or? I finished the beer and opened another. But they had to remember what happened, I thought. I walked back into the room and said, didn't you guys see that everything just, SHH? Jessie said, pulling on her blanket, this is the part where Mr. Halloran comes. I need a beer, I said, but I just had one. I just asked. Jessie cried. I changed my mind, I said, and found myself opening the fridge, again, opening a can of Miller Lite. Maddening, crazy, I thought. This just happened. I drained the beer in seconds and opened another. My hand raised it to my lips and despite my best efforts to keep my mouth closed, I drank it wholly. I opened another, walking into the room. Slurring, I screamed, didn't you guys see that everything just SHH? Jessie said, staring at the TV, just 2 feet in front of her. She was alone in the empty room, only her and the simple chair she sat on. The television set showed black and white static, in the middle a silhouette of her rolled up the screen past the top then from the bottom to the top again. It was dark outside the window. No lights. What are you doing here? She whispered, I told you to run. Where are we? I asked. She did not answer, only stared into the TV, but I knew regardless. The room was identical to hers, just empty of all furniture, except that damn TV. When are we? She said. What do you mean? Look closely. I leaned in. Each piece of static showed glimpses of people living their lives in this very room. A man passed off his baby to a woman. A kid playing some video game on the TV. A woman welcome a man home. Toddlers falling over. People celebrating New Year's. A surprise party. A man and a woman, armed with knives, attacking another man and woman. I've been watching this screen for I don't know how long looking for answers, Jessie said, but sometimes the news comes on. Just normal stuff like a tornado watch or gang violence or sports, but it's always brief and then just this, static. There has to be a reason, though. So I just watch. And wait. I took a seat next to Jessie and waited. The static hummed and brushed in my ears hypnotically and time seemed to slow or quicken, I could not tell. The black of the static formed together and it was like staring through a dark mirror as a woman screamed and cried in my ears, "What are you doing? Stop!" And a level voice stated, "Tragedy last night, a man and woman murdered their dates in a Bridgeport apartment." Reports of screams and crashes were heard, and when questioned, then those silver spines, covered with static, shot out from our chests and into the TV and that pitch-black creature rose as smoke from our throats and pulled us into the screen. I swear, that's everything. That's all I remember before I was standing, covered in blood, over Vicky's body. Ask Jessie, she'll tell you the same about Mark. Edit, I wrote the first half for a prompt like a year ago or something and the second half just now. Let me know what you think. Work in progress. Edit, whoever commented I like it, I think you're shadow banned. Story 12, Firewater. It was a year after I'd sworn my abstinence from alcohol that I'd had my first drink. A year after my brief stint as an altar server, a year after Father Kelly took me aside in the sacristy and gave me a choice. He asked me if I was willing to keep my body pure and free from the corruption of alcohol in exchange for becoming a true servant of God. After absent-mindedly agreeing to this, he gently placed his hand on my head and I felt it. I can't describe it exactly or even be sure if he did anything, but I felt it. It was directly after I had my first drink, a shot, when my best friend began convulsing. Undetected coronary abnormalities. He was dead within minutes. Completely out of the blue, a freak incident. It wasn't long after that I'd earned the nickname Firewater. A grim one, given the circumstances, but a sticky one nonetheless. Preceding this, I only drank more. Soon, I began noticing the mysterious accidents that would occur all over the city following every drink I had. I barely paid attention, until the news report about the cable car of school kids that collapsed came the morning after a particularly wild night. 15 kids dead. That's when I started to do the math. I'd done 10 shots, which roughly equated to 15 ounces. An ounce per kid. This was the one that really scared me off it. After weeks of drinking nothing but Coke, virgin cocktails and grape juice, I decided I was being paranoid. I measured out exactly 1 ounce of tequila and downed it. I felt fine. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? I felt relieved of my old superstitions. The next day I was planning my father's funeral. Another freak accident. My father was standing outside, observing the construction that my childhood home was undergoing when a hammer slipped and fell from the roof. Could have happened to anyone. A day later was the funeral. There was a large turnout. 200. I kept thinking on that number. I remember thinking how exact it was. As the day continued, my family and I grieved and greeted. We stayed at a nice hotel in my hometown, all 200 of us. We had lunch at the hotel after the ceremony. Everybody was drinking all around me, my sisters, brothers, mother, cousins, family friends, all getting to wash their sorrows down to the bottom of a bottle, and there I was, drinking goddamn water. There I was, trapped by my own self-inflicted sobriety at my own father's funeral. By nightfall, I'd had it. People die every day. Fathers die every day. It's got nothing to do with how much I goddamn drink. I was ready to go on the biggest binge of my lifetime. Everybody else got to drink, why the hell shouldn't I get to grieve the way I want? It started off with some cousins and my siblings doing a pub crawl around all our old favorite joints. Wine, beer, vodka, tequila. You name it, we drank it. As the night progressed, everybody departed, one by one, until it was just me, and I had no intentions of stopping. There was no measuring, no calculating ounces this time. I went full hog. It was around 3 a.m. when they finally kicked me out and into a cab, and sent me back to the hotel, though not before I made a few stops on the way. The rest of the night was a drunken haze of wandering around my hotel room, drinking from the bottle, puking, and starting over. The next day, when I finally awoke, with a headache that had split stones, I staggered through my room. It smelled of sewage and there were dozens of empty bottles laying all around the room, among the puke stains. I shut the curtains and stumbled around, picking up bottles. I half thought about trying to measure how much I drank. I checked the time and decided to head down to breakfast. Everyone would be there by this time, so it'd be easy to sneak in, unnoticed. The elevator pinged and I stepped out into the lobby and turned to the double doors of the large dining hall. I was just mentally calculating my binge from the previous night when I saw the police officers milling around outside the dining hall. Flashing lights flickered outside and police tape was tapered across the entrance. Medics flowed in and out. I stumbled over to the double-doored entrance to the dining hall and knew instantly I needn't have bothered calculating how much I drank. 200 ounces. Story 13, the time my paranoia possibly saved my life. So, today, I was staying in a hotel about 275 miles from home. I've been in the city for a couple days, but we just switched hotels last night due to the fact the other one was mold infested and gross. Anyways, we're here to drop my brother off at college, and tonight was his last night with us before we left. We decided to have a silly string fight in the hotel parking lot, run around the outside of the hotel, just fun, stupid, teenager things. Somebody was standing on top of the stairs that lead to the second floor of the motel watching and staring at us. No big deal though, we were being pretty loud and obnoxious, ha ha. My brother and my mom left to bring my brother back to his dorm room. I decided to stay behind at the hotel room as all I had been doing for the past 3 days was riding in a car and I needed a break, and I was on the phone with my friend, we'll call him James for the sake of this story. So I was just talking to James, when all of a sudden someone knocks on the door the same exact way my mom does. We have one of those secret knocks. I was about to swing open the door per usual, as I was 99% certain it was my mother, but something told me to look out the peephole for some reason. The person standing outside my hotel room door was the same person watching us earlier on top of the stairs. I'm very paranoid, so obviously I didn't answer the door. I start freaking out and talking to James quietly, and the person yells "Open this fucking door," and starts banging harder on the door. I sit there talking quietly to James for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then slowly walk back up to the door and go to look through the peephole when this person slams their body weight against the door and starts viciously shaking the handle. At this point, I text my brother on Snapchat at least 30 times to come back to the hotel. He says they're about 10 minutes away and just to sit tight, and that's he's coming back. He does, and by the time they get back the person is gone. Definitely not the worst of experiences, but I'm still pretty shaken up by this. Edit, last night I went to the front desk as we were leaving to go to take my brother back to his dorm. I decided to go with them when they came back to the hotel, and told them if anyone asked for a keycard to my room to not give it to them. As with this motel they don't require any ID or proof of you being in that room, you just ask for a key to room _ and they give it to you. Apparently, my paranoia paid off, because according to the front desk clerk, the same person came and asked for a key to my room. I'm not sure what would have happened if I would have opened that door or if they would have managed to obtain a key to my room, and I don't want to find out. Story 14, I need to know what's going on. I don't know who's going to see this, if anyone, but I need help. I've been admitted to the Pay mental institution for 3 years now. I don't know why. I don't belong here. Everyone around me is absolutely psycho, and I'm not. You need to tell them that I shouldn't be here. But I'm getting off track. Earlier today, the staff gave us access to the few computers in the upstairs library. They told us nothing apart from the fact that we were free to do as we please. It opened on this website, I think it's called Reddit or something of the sort, and they told us that we had individual accounts. They called it an experiment and they monitored everything we wrote, did or discovered. The rest of the loonies in here lost interest within 5 minutes and became restless, and they were taken out. There are 5 of us now. There's me, 36, and then there's 42, 11, 38 and 23. It's been hours now, and the security team and staff have decided to take a break, watching us from a distance rather than breathing down our necks. I'm taking this opportunity now to get this message out there. The government are planning something. I need to tell anyone that will listen. Every other day they inject us with God knows what. It infects our bloodstreams and it takes over. It's like sick experiments. You never know if you're going to be knocked out for days or awake for weeks. I've heard them all talk. I have. They're planning to perfect something. They said it would be in huge doses and administered through the city water system in major places. Before I could hear any more, they caught me eavesdropping and they beat me until I fell unconscious. It's hell here. I think that they're trying to alter the way that the public thinks and acts. I'm so scared for all of you. Because there's about to be hell unleashed. I've seen what this drug can do. One of my only close friends was choked to death by one of the patients on it. Most of you won't even believe me, but do whatever you can to avoid it. It's just constant testing. Every single bloody day. I tried to escape it once. Tried to slit my wrists with a shard of glass, but they'll never let you escape that easily. They'll keep forcing it into you until you're no longer a human being, but a savage killer with nothing to lose. I plan to keep updating as much as possible, that is if I'm not murdered before then or I've gone crazy like the rest of them. I don't know how long they're going to give us on these accounts, or how often, but I can only pray that I can save everyone on the outside. You need to investigate this. You need to help me. You need to save yourself. And please, don't let them fool you, they're everywhere. Story 15, We Got Lost. Recently I was hiking through the Yucatan Peninsula and found this, for lack of a better word, memoir. I felt like I needed to share it. I first noticed the shiny canister while I was taking a water break by a scenic waterfall. That will be important later. My initial inclination was to hope, this was an elaborate prank. The blood-stained container and paper leads me to believe otherwise. I'm not sure why I'm posting this here other than to maybe ask for some advice. What should I do? Nothing? Give it to the local authorities? I'm honestly at a loss. I don't even know how old it is. Anyways, I'll just transcribe the text here from the letter as best I can. A lot of it is smeared with blood stains. I don't have much time. They will find me soon, but goddammit someone needs to know about this. If you get this, my name is Clayton Sprawls from Des Moines, Iowa. Me and my friends are eligible for spring break. We drove across the country and mostly had eligible but we got lost. It's not hard to do. A lot of the terrain looks the same and if you get turned around it's hard to remember at a crossroads which way you came from. There's not much in the way of GPS or eligible. We stopped at this little town called Vista Board eligible. The town was barely anything but we were out of gas and hadn't eaten for a while. Gus, the more obnoxious and adventurous of us taked us into going into this little eligible. We walked up, it was clearly we were the only Americans that had maybe ever been here. Two really big guys were sitting outside playing checkers. They stared at us when eligible looked unsettled. Gus insisted we go ahead on into the bar. It would be fun mixing up with these Mexican, folks way out in the sticks. As soon as we walked in we saw it, or her. She was chained up inside this cage thing. 8 or 9 men were standing around watching her while one guy was ferociously raping her. We hear, the metal cage rattling while we were walking up but just thought it was some bartender wrestling with a keg. All of the men turned and looked at us and the man doing the thing to the girl stopped and they all stared at each other. I took one step back but the two guys playing checkers eligible so we sat down at a table. We tried not to look. The girl, she could not have been more than 16, was bound by her hands to the top of this cage. The back metal was lined with nails so that every time she was thrusted, her back slammed against a wall of these tiny spikes. Enough to hurt her, but illegible blood was everywhere. The man who was, God damn it, I have a hard time writing this. The man who was raping her was covered in her blood. He wore a wife-beater shirt and green pants were around his ankles. The most fucked up thing is several men were watching, but a bunch of guys were just drinking beer and playing cards and paying the torture no mind. It was almost as if illegible no big deal, like this kind of thing was common here. The very large guys who were playing checkers made us sit down at a table. All of us were scared out of our minds. But the worst was Daniel. He was a bit of a faggot anyway. We kind of brought him along out of pity hoping we could cure him of being such a pussy. We thought this adventure would do him some illegible, maybe even get a little tail. Daniel was hyperventilating. Me and Gus and Robbie were so scared we were illegible. I'm not sure who actually pissed their pants but one of them did. The man who was raping that poor girl pulled his pants up and spoke in Spanish to a couple of the other guys and began walking over to us while another guy took over his duties. Oh my god, we're going to die, whispered Robbie. These guys are some kind of cartel, they're not going to let us leave. We're going to fucking die after what we've seen. Robbie was the only one who spoke any Spanish and he told us all to shut the fuck up. He said these guys were some kind of fucked up cartel, but they were laughing among themselves at our misfortune. He said they were going to fuck with us a little bit then let us go, They don't need 4 dead American kids in their town. The bloody rapist walked up towards us. The rattling of the metal cage resumed. The girl began screaming while her body was being slammed against the iron. "Welcome, amigos," the man said in broken English. He put a few menus down on our table while blood was dripping off his shirt. "Can I start you off with an appetizer?" A few of the other men in the bar laughed while illegible, and then the screaming got worse. All of us were scared shitless. Finally, Daniel of all people managed to say, we just want to leave." "Oh no, amigos," the man replied coolly, flipping over one of the menus. "You can't leave now. We have half-off pints of beer between 4 and 7. The other men laughed again while the cage rattling intensified. "Oh my God!" the Mexican man yelled. "Did one of you have an accident?" He laughed, pointed at the puddle of piss on the floor. He looked at Daniel. "You look like a little worm that would do something like this. Go clean yourself up, then you can mop this piss up, amigo." Daniel simply nodded and left. "You boys gotta try our shrimp and lime en fuego," he said. "You okay with that, amigos?" The 3 of us nodded. I wanted so badly to look at the girl, but I just stared straight down at the table. The man with the bloodstained shirt just stood there and stared at us for several minutes. Illegible. Finally the silence was broken when we heard our car start up. Everyone looked at one another. Daniel. He must have, escaped to the car from a bathroom window. Motherfucker. He's abandoning us. We heard the car speed off. "Oh no, amigos," the man said to us. "Your friend left you. I will call you an Uber. Don't worry." Everyone laughed again. We heard the car speed off in the distance. A few moments later, we heard the engine again. Illegible crashed that fucking car right through the wall of the bar. Daniel drove the car through the wall and took out 3 or 4 guys, but most importantly the girl. He destroyed that fucked up cage she was locked in and killed her instantly, taking her out of her misery. I escaped in a hail of gunfire. I can only guess the other guys are dead. I ran through the desert for hours. I followed this stream, which led to a bigger stream. I can hear them coming. I've managed to escape illegible, but after several miles they were on my trail again. So here I sit. At this goddamn waterfall. Fucking beautiful. How many girls have been in that cage? I'm going to just end it all. I'm jumping over this cliff. Hopefully someone will find this note and pass it on to the FBI or some shit. Or NATO or the United Nations? Some craziness is going on here. Me and my backpack will be somewhere at the bottom of the lake over this cliff. Tell my parents I love them and I'm sorry. But I'm glad I'm going to die so I never have to have the image in my brain again about what I saw today. Well, that's it. That's the note. What in the actual fuck should I do with this? Please comment below and tell me. Story 16, Calls from the Dead. So, recently I had to change my number because of my obsessed ex. He had become crazy after I ended our relationship and things got too much, especially after waking up one morning to 300 missed calls on my phone. Anyways, I contacted my provider who happily obliged to the change and I was given a brand new number. Everything was cool until 2 weeks later. I was sleeping, it was 3:40 a.m. after all. My phone began ringing. I recognized the number on the screen but had no idea how this was happening. It was my best friend's number. My best friend died 3 years ago. He hanged himself after a failed relationship. After his death, I had memorized his number. It just made me feel closer to him. Shocked and terrified, I answered the phone. There was no voice, just static. I can't begin to explain how I felt. It's not something I think you can describe unless you've experienced it yourself. This occurred daily for a month. I was thinking of changing my number again because it was just creepy. After his death, those close to him would call his number occasionally just to somehow feel close to him. We knew he would never answer. Whenever I rang his number it went straight to voicemail. It was always turned off. His mom had his phone and kept it safe in her home. It was given back to his mom after police took his body away for an autopsy, and for his mom, she found comfort in keeping his phone in her home. A month after the calls began, a call came in at 3:40 a.m. once again, the time that Mark sent a goodbye text to his mom before he ended his life. This time when I answered the phone, I was shocked to hear a familiar voice on the other end of the phone. "Mark? Is that really you?" I stuttered. I felt the color drain out of my face. "I'm always with you," he responded, clear as anything. I felt sick to my stomach. I attempted to continue a conversation with him but the line went dead. I frantically called his phone back, but of course it went straight to voicemail. I attempted to call a further 6 times but again, all I got was voicemail. I never received another call from Mark's number again. I continue to occasionally call his number but it goes to voicemail every time. I talked with Mark's mom a couple days after my phone call, and she was convinced that Mark was trying to make contact to let those close to him know that he was okay, and happy. I truly want to believe that too. I don't think there is any other explanation. I just hope that wherever he is happy because while he was in my life, he was the best friend anybody could ever ask for. We'll update if need be. Would love to receive another call. Story 17, my closet door keeps opening in the middle of the night, and I thought it was my dad. Okay, my father died about 6 months ago. Cancer, go figure. I never really spoke to him after he was diagnosed. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. You might find it selfish, but I couldn't see him like that. I refused to see him like that. I remember when I got the call from the hospital, I was at work. As always, they told me he passed early that morning, and they did everything they could. Even though they never do. I was infuriated because they didn't call me immediately, they didn't want to bother me. It was a joke of a hospital. The last time I spoke to him was a month before he died, and it was the first time I spoke to him since he was diagnosed. He was getting better, he was walking and talking, but his sickness was the last thing I wanted to talk about. I should have talked to him about it. I'm such a cliché for this, but the night he died I bought a Ouija board. The guilt was eating me alive and I needed to speak to him one more time. He was the last living family member I had, and I screwed it up. It was a cheap Ouija board, nothing really authentic. The planchette felt cheap, clearly made of plastic. I knew if I stepped on it, it'd break. I didn't really know where to start or what steps to take. So I lit 3 candles around it and turned all the lights out. Hello spirits, I felt goofy doing this alone and probably wrong. If you don't mind, can you please be quiet? I'm trying to reach my father. My father only. I picture my father in my head and I close my eyes. I take in a deep breath. Dad, please hear me out. I was completely terrified for what he might say. I am so sorry, please let me explain. I felt the planchette move, and my eyes shot open. It wasn't like anything I felt before. I could feel my own fingers moving it, but I wasn't in control. It was a shot of electricity burning within my fingertips, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like home. The planchette moved to the yes. I knew it was my dad, it had to be him. The planchette started to move to other letters. H-E-A-L-T-H-Y, you're healthy? Dad, that's great. Excitement filled my entire body, I was no longer afraid. L-O-V-E-Y-O-U. My eyes filled up with tears. Dad, I love you too. I am so sorry, I was just so scared. I should have never ignored you. I miss you so much. I must look like a crazy person screaming at a piece of cardboard. I-T-I-S-O-K-A-Y. Maybe we can talk like this from now on. I shriek. N-O-N-O-N-O. I felt my heart break a little. But why? I ask. The planchette moves to goodbye. I stare at the board dumbfounded. Dad. I say aloud. Nothing. Answer me. Now. You owe it to me. Nothing. Please. Finally the planchette moves. H-E-L-P-M-E. A cold pressure sinks into my shoulder, making my whole body sink down. Dad, Dad. Did you just touch me? It moves back to yes. I can help you. Let me help you, I say. Oh, you want out? I ask. What do you mean? Oh, you okay. Get out? I ask. I wasn't completely sure on how to help. It moved to goodbye, and that was the last I hear for the rest of the night. I felt so much better after helping my dad out. He was finally free of the Ouija board. When I got ready for bed, I grabbed a sleep shirt out of my closet, closed the door and jumped in bed. This was an every night thing. I always shut my closet door. However, when I woke up the next morning, it was open. I tried to rationalize it away. But the only thing I could think of is, it had to be my father. He would do it to me when I was younger. Just to pick on me. He knew I always had a weird thing about keeping my closet door open at night. It has always been a problem of mine. I just shut the door and went about my day. This became a routine. Every night I would shut the closet door, and every morning it was open. It was comforting. Or so I thought it was. About 2 months ago something weird started to happen. It wasn't just the closet door. When I would get home from work around 8 p.m., all the kitchen cabinets would be open. Some pots and pans would be on the floor. At first I thought it was a break-in, but everything was locked every time this would happen. Even a police officer investigated it. Nothing. Last night I woke up to my closet door flying open. I was paralyzed with fear. It no longer felt like home. The room felt to the bone chill. A dark mass stood tall in the closet door frame. It moved closer to me. I could make out arms and legs. Deep dark green eyes glue bright in the darkness. I now know it wasn't my father. The blanket protecting my body flew across the room and I felt a tight burning sensation strangle my ankles and wrists. I tried to choke out the word, help, but something was preventing me. The dark mass became more and more defined into a living creature hovering my body. The face shaped into the most horrifying thing I have ever seen. The heavy green eyes pierced into mine. I felt blood drain from my ears and nose. The most blood-curdling noise came from the creature itself, making my eyes burn and ache. All I knew to do was to imagine a white light around me. That's exactly what I did. I imagined a bright white light protecting me like my blanket was. I could see my father standing in the corner, trying to come to my rescue, but he was bounded by a demon he knew too well, cancer. And in a split second everything stopped. The creature above me, gone. My father, gone. Silence. It was now bright outside. Maybe I dreamt it all, or maybe it was a bad case of sleep paralysis. Either way, I took the Ouija board that next morning and burned it. Maybe that'll protect me from now on. Maybe that demon will be gone forever. Maybe, I made it worse. Story 18, Blackout. This is a true story. When I was 27 I had something tragic happen. I was on a business trip for a company I had just joined for training. See, I live in Arkansas. It is always humid. Here, the winters are short and barely anything happens in this god-forsaken state. I was in Chicago for this trip for about 5 days, and one night in the hotel restaurant I noticed a Facebook post from my little brother. My little brother was one out of my 6 siblings. He was a middle child and was pretty laid back usually. Unless he was mad. He was the type of person to black out when he got angry. He would come to and realize he was choking my other little brother against the wall and never knew he was doing it. This happened a lot during our childhood and he ended up in counseling for it for a few years. His Facebook post while dark wasn't out of the ordinary for him. Going MIA. F it. As his older sister I didn't think much of it. I grew up with him. I knew how his mood swings were. I knew him, or so I thought. Friday rolled around and it was time for me to go home. I gathered my things and rode on the shuttle to the airport. I grabbed some lunch with some of my fellow co-workers I had met on this trip. They were all from different states: Kentucky, Texas, Missouri etc. I said my final goodbyes and walked to my gate waiting to board my plane. I got a phone call. It was a girl I had been friends with since 3rd grade. She was my best friend actually. But we had a falling out 3 years before and since then we weren't very close. So it was odd to me when she called me asking how my trip had went and how I was. Of course my trip had been fine. I was ready to come home and see my husband and kids. Something in her voice sounded off. Even after losing touch I knew this girl. I knew what she sounded like when something wasn't right, and her voice made me uneasy. After a 4-minute conversation, I got off the phone and got on the plane. I am a nervous person, always have been, and this was only my 3rd time being on a plane, so I was already uneasy. I mean, who hasn't seen Final Destination, right? And the call I had just gotten was heavy on my mind, but I brushed it off and put my Bluetooth headset in and cranked up my music to drown the sound of my flight. 1 hour half later I landed in Memphis around 9:30 and got off my plane, went down to get my bag and met my husband. I was happy to be home even if I still had another hour and a half drive to Arkansas. My husband got my bag and we headed to my car and I opened the door. Have you ever had a situation when you asked a question and instantly regretted it? I have. A roll of toilet paper in my floorboard of my passenger seat. I said, why do you have a whole roll of toilet paper in the floor, ha ha. I turned around and my husband was standing behind me almost in tears. He said to me, I've got something to tell you, and you're not going to like it. I froze half, expecting him to tell me he had cheated on me while away, and after what he said next I wish that's what it was. They found your little brother dead in his apartment today. He shot himself. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. I sat down in my passenger seat and screamed out. The whole parking garage echoed my pain. I knew why she had called me now, why her tone was off. See, everyone knew. Everyone but me. She knew I didn't know and wanted to call to check on me anyways. My mom later stated why I was the last to know of his death. She told me she knew if she would have told me while I was in Chicago I wouldn't have gotten on the plane, and she was right. To be honest, I probably would have been arrested and detained for freaking out in the middle of the airport like a crazy person with a bomb. His Facebook post, the one he made on that Wednesday night while I was eating a burger, enjoying a drink, my baby brother was putting a gun to his head and pulled the trigger. He wasn't found until that Friday. I did nothing. I said nothing. My baby brother died in his apartment, alone, and was there alone for 2 days. He was always happy, always smiling, was full of life and brought a smile to everyone's face he seen. I wonder to myself, did he know what he was doing? Was he angry for a minute? Did he black out? The demons inside my brother never showed themselves, never came out of hiding. My parents, me, my other 5 siblings never knew the monsters that lived inside of him, but they were there the whole time. I knew my brother. Or did I? Story 19, if you can read this. If you can read this, then I am not dead, though death would be the preferable fate to what I am now suffering. I have been taken and this record has been made public as instructed so that the book may be recovered and our holy work completed while there is still time. I pray, Devla, that it is not too late by then. The chasm by the lake was discovered by a kinsman on the 5th day of this month. The word went out and an emergency council convened. After days of ceaseless arguing and prayer, it was decided that 9 of us were to be sent out to set to work building the wall immediately. While we could spare no more, each of us was carefully selected as the best for the job. We were the strongest in faith and the stoutest in body, the most skilled and highly educated artisans and scholars of the clans. Due to the length of the journey and the harsh terrain through which we would travel, we could bring little else but food, water, weapons, hand tools, and the book. Such was our pride, our arrogance, to believe we could overcome all obstacles. We were the best. If anyone was capable of this task, it was our select group. our companion. 6 days and 6 nights we labored ceaselessly, cutting timber from the surrounding forest, shaping and carving the lumber, blessing the logs and fitting them over and around the hell mouth. We worked in shifts to allow constant progress. Each day was 5 hours of rest followed by relieving a cousin from his labor. We broke ourselves for you. We ate our own head for you. We thought it was enough. We thought we mattered. We were wrong. 6 times it emerged, breaking through the stout logs as though they were tinder. It took Ne and Maya. It took Stevo, and Yanko. It took Vadim by the river bank. 5 times we drove it back. When it took the barrow we fled. We dropped everything and like dogs we ran as far as we could go. I don't know if my cousins are safe. I haven't seen any of them since that night. The safe places are abandoned and in ruins. The campsites are gone without a trace. Our associates among the gorges have moved on. I can only hope to habitations far from here. My only companion now is the one to whom this record is entrusted, the one who will make it public after I'm gone. Please. I don't have much time. None of us do. The clan will not act. Not now. Not soon enough. Even if I could contact anyone, there is no one to replace us. We were the best of our number who could be spared. If you can read this, then do what needs to be done. Do what we failed to do. Recover the book. Build the wall high and strong. Carve and paint and bless it exactly as the book says. 4 days and 3 nights remain left to you. Fail in this as we have and no one will be left to regret it. Jadev Lasa. Story 20, My imaginary friend, the man who hurts me. I sat on the couch and tried to wiggle shoes onto uncooperative 2-year-old feet. We were late. We are always late. Ow. That hurts. He said, jerking. Oh baby, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get your socks on. What did I do? Not you, him. Your brother is all the way across the room. I know he didn't do anything to you, so don't start with that already. We're running late. I was exasperated as he carelessly rolled around and I had to flip the shoe over in time for him to turn back. Not brother. Him. Then he pointed to a spot in the corner away from his brother. Imaginary friend, I assumed. Oh yeah? What's his be still Link so I can get this on? What's his name? I asked, finally getting both shoes on. The man who hurts me. He said, looking back over to the empty corner. I sighed. This was the creepiest of my children. That's his name, huh? Sounds like he's not a lot of fun. Come on Bubs. Mom. He said to tell you he's real. Link's 2-year-old face was serious now. I nodded. Car. Now. I said, gesturing to our apartment door. I shivered and looked at the corner again. I didn't assume this was a ghost. I assumed it was a 2-year-old with a vivid imagination. That's the fun thing about kids. They are incredibly imaginative, and most of the creepy things they tell us have more to do with an experience they are trying to work out on their own in a way that makes sense to them. The man who hurts him became a frequent person talked about. I'd be buckling Link in his car seat and he would cry out that the man who hurts him had hurt him again. We'd be walking around the neighborhood and his friend would hurt him. Minor things that I figured were a way to get me to pick him up and cuddle and kiss him. I joked with a friend at work about the creepy things my son said and she insisted it was a ghost he was seeing. I reminded her that I didn't believe in ghosts. I went with my mom to the gym after taking the boys into daycare, telling her how the new invisible friend was coming up more frequently. I know you don't believe in this stuff, but I always knew your kids could see things. Link especially. He has a guardian angel. My mother said this all carefully. She was religious and built her life and identity around her Jewish faith. We'd had several arguments on my atheist stance. At this point she was careful not to bring it up because it would lead to another fight, and we generally got along if we don't talk about religion or how I parent my kids versus how she parented us. I'm pretty sure it's not a ghost. I'm getting worried that it's another adult he's around though. I'm bringing it up with the doctor at his visit. I keep asking him if there's another grown-up who is hurting him, but he just tells me no. I don't know how to figure out what he's talking about without telling him I don't believe him. It wouldn't hurt to consider. I cut her off before she could continue. I'm a single mom living in an apartment complex with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. The last thing I need is to start thinking that my apartment is haunted when I'm up alone at night. It's not a ghost. There are no such things as ghosts. I was firm with my tone and my mother raised her hands and rolled her eyes. The doctor's appointment went about as well as they usually did. I have a little guy, and while his brother is over the charts on height and weight, Link usually stays under it, and so I always have to go over whether he's going to need extra nutrition to put on some weight. Pedialyte is great if he would actually drink it and not dump it out, plus it was $2 a bottle and I had to really struggle to keep buying it. I almost forgot to bring up the friend. Any other concerns? The resident asked. Nice thing about state insurance was that somehow I ended up at the hospital where we saw whatever resident they had in that day. I missed having a regular pediatrician. Yeah. He, has an imaginary friend, which wouldn't be a big deal, but this friend keeps hurting him. How do you mean? Have you seen marks? She asked, suddenly interested. No. I'm worried it's an adult, but I can't seem to ask the right way to point out who it is. I've asked his brother if he's seen anything, but he's 4, so I'm getting a lot of no from both of them. He's insistent that it's just this imaginary friend. I wondered if the doctor could take me seriously with my son climbing onto my shoulders and then on top of my head where he perched like a cat or a hat. I have to get my superior. I'll be back. The resident scurried off out of the room, and I wondered if they would call social services. I let Link swing down my body and up my arms. The head doctor, I guessed, came in alone and a lot faster than I was used to at this place. I retold the story while trying to keep Link from damaging himself or anything else in the room. I tried to remember any instance and bring it up. I told her that I was concerned that it could be an adult that he was trying to tell me about, and reiterated that I wasn't sure how to ask him that would give me a straightforward answer. I also noted that I did consider it was a way to get attention from me, where I would hold and cuddle him. She nodded and got Link's attention. Hey buddy, I hear you have a mean friend who hurts you. She said cheerily. Yeah. The man who hurts me. Link said, smiling back at her. She asked a few questions about appearance and other identifying characteristics that got 2-year-old answers that really didn't make sense to us but did to him. Is he in the room now? Yeah. Where is he? Link smiled and pointed to the ceiling in the corner closest to us. Then he frowned, almost confused. He moved his finger, tracing a path to the next corner as if trying to keep up with movement. My heart stopped for a few seconds. The doctor, whose name I never caught, seemed to start talking a few times and then stopped. She was shaken too. Well, I don't think this is anything like another adult. He's not describing another adult when we talk, and for the most part he doesn't seem afraid of the man. I think you should definitely keep an ear out if things change, but I think this is definitely imaginary. Anything else? I shook my head and she quickly left the room. Come on, creepy, I said, burying my face into his neck and hugging him tightly to me. I grabbed our stuff and he looked at the room, watching the corner as we headed out. Fast forward 3 years, I have a restless night mentioned in my last story. A night of my blanket being pulled and growling and hearing footsteps. The next morning I woke up tired and I watched everyone getting ready while I recounted my night to my boyfriend, who slept through it. You were most likely half asleep and dreaming and woke yourself up snoring. My boyfriend teased. I figured that was it. I don't know what else it could be. I yawned and reached to hug Link, who I realized had been listening to us. I wasn't completely sure I had just been dreaming, but I felt foolish saying so. I didn't think I believed in ghosts. I don't think I know exactly where I stand on that now. You weren't asleep, Mommy. It was the clown. He is. Link started but was interrupted by his brother. I looked at my boyfriend, but he seemed to miss the clown part. I shivered. I wanted to ask my son to clarify what he meant, but the moment had passed and I certainly didn't need to encourage his imagination. Or mine for that matter. So I wonder if Sage works on clown ghosts that like to keep me up at night.